everyone. Please, if you haven't done so already, take a seat as we are ready to begin. My name is William Wexler. I'm the Senior Director of the N7 Initiative at the Atlantic Council. The N7 Initiative is a partnership of the Atlantic Council and the Jeffrey M. Talpins Foundation, dedicated to doing what we can to help further the regional integration underway in the wake of the Abraham Accords. We're here today for a conference to welcome and recognize the progress that's been made over the last 3 years. It's amazing. Seems like time flies. I remember when this news broke and surprised many people in the world, and now many of the interactions between Israel and countries like the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco are routine and commonplace. There's a lot of progress that needs to be made in the future, but we should also recognize how much has been done so far. Before I get to our first speaker, I want to remind everyone that is here in person and is watching online that if you have any questions along our entire afternoon's worth of discussions, those in person should look at the QR code that's on your seat. Use that to go to a website to pose a question that will be then given to our moderators. And for people that are online, go to askac.org and you'll be able to do the same. So with that, let me first introduce my partner in all of this work, Oren Eisner, who is the president of the Jeffrey M. Talpins Foundation. Oren will be joining us on screen.
My fellow partner in crime here. Thank you, Will. And on behalf of the Jeffrey M. Talpins Foundation and the N7 Initiative, I would like to welcome you all to our event celebrating the 3-year anniversary of the signing of the historic Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords launched a new era for the Middle East and beyond, one that embodies a promise of a brighter future for all. The N7 Initiative emerged from the Abraham Accords, and we too are committed to a better future for all. Since our launch, N7 has been committed to bringing governments together to identify and find solutions to the shared problems that we can, yes, address today together to deliver benefits to all the people of the region. And while we know that disagreements and challenges will continue, those disagreements, they are finite. The possibilities that can emerge from cooperation are infinite. That's the promise of the Abraham Accords. That's what we would like to, that's the promise we wish to embody at N7. And though we are joining today in celebration of these historic accords, our celebration today is muted in light of recent disasters in Morocco and Libya. Our hearts go out to the earthquake victims in Morocco and to the flood victims in Libya. We pray for the victims and families, and may God offer comfort, strength, and support to everyone. N7 is committed to working with the governments to help with the immediate crisis. We continue to work however we can in the future to help and try to mitigate future disasters. Back to today's event and celebration. Thank you all really for being part of this event. I want to thank all the speakers, guests, everyone for joining us today. It's an honor to mark this anniversary, and you honor us by joining. It is now my pleasure to give the stage back over to my friend Will. Take the next.
Thank you very much, Oren. We have a very tight schedule for all of our work today. And I'm going to start by introducing all together the 3 members of Congress who are going to kick us off for discussion. It's going to come one after another. First, you'll hear from the Honorable Brad Schneider. He is, of course, a U.S. representative from Illinois, and he is the co-founder and co-chair of the Bipartisan Abraham Accords Caucus. In today's world where there are so many things that are partisan, this is really one of the few things where members come across party lines, come together for common goals, and it's really a great accomplishment of Representative Schneider and his colleagues to create this community. He also, of course, serves on the Foreign Affairs Committee and on the House Ways and Means Committee. After Congressman Schneider. We're going to hear from Congressman Dean Phillips. Congressman Phillips is from Minnesota. He is the ranking member of the House Subcommittee on the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia. He's also co-chair of the House Democratic Policy and Communications Committee and ranking member of the House Small Business Committee. And he, like Representative Schneider, is amongst the most bipartisan members in Congress. And then we will finish with Representative Joe Wilson, representative from South Carolina, of course, and the chairman of the House Subcommittee on Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia. Representative Wilson is a veteran of the U.S. military. He previously served in the executive branch in the Department of Energy. He is a very senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the most senior member of the House Armed Services Committee, where he's on the subcommittees of Readiness and Strategic Forces. He also serves on the House Committee of Education and the Workforce and the Subcommittee on Health. Thank you very much again. We have a very full house here, and with no further ado, let me introduce Representative Brad Schneider.
Good afternoon. It is a great privilege to be here, and I am very humbled to be standing here in front of such an impressive group, a diverse array of leaders who have had a significant impact in making the Abraham Accords a reality and promoting and broadening the possibilities of what the Accords provide. I want to first say I'm grateful to the Jeffrey M. Talpins Foundation, the Atlantic Council, the Wilson Center for supporting today's event. And before I go on, like Oren said, I want to express my condolences to our guests from Morocco, to the Kingdom of Morocco, certainly to the people of Morocco. The world's been watching, and our heart is with them, and we are there to stand for support. I'm going to go off script for a little bit here. This morning I had a meeting with some young people from the region, from Abraham Accord countries, and we were talking. One of the people there made an observation that I'll share, and I'm thinking it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday observation in some ways. Monday, we marked the 22nd anniversary of the horrific events on September 11th, 2001. Today, we're marking the 30th anniversary of the Oslo agreements, and on Friday, we marked the 3rd anniversary of the Abraham Accords. And the observation was made, I can't take credit for it, is that these are a reflection of different extremes. Obviously, 9/11 was the essence of extremism in a worldview. But the Abraham Accords are the exact opposite of that. A worldview that is optimistic, that sees the possibilities in a region, that is building bridges between peoples and countries to create opportunities for a lasting and true peace. And I think that's what we're here today to talk about. To get to this point, it took deep commitment from the people across government, industry, and civil society. People who know in their hearts that the Middle East really can have a peaceful and prosperous future. Much of this has been made possible by the folks in this room and our sponsors, the Talpins Foundation and the Atlantic Council, which stood up the N7, a crucial venue to track 1 and 1.5 negotiations, complementing the Negev Forum. I've spoken to several gatherings before this, and I look forward to attending the upcoming conference in Israel next month. Obviously, there are challenges and too many challenges to list here, and they're coming from every direction. Extremist elements place ideological goals over the peace and prosperity. But those who seek peace, those who are willing to extend a hand and work together, who are making these accords a success, are leading the path and creating the way to make the region a success. In Congress, I'm extremely proud to be one of 4 House chairs of the Abraham Accords Caucus. I'm proud that there's 4 in the House and 4 chairs in the Senate. It's hard enough to do things Republicans and Democrats in this building. To do House and Senate is truly an accomplishment, inspired maybe by the Accords. But we're here because we know how important this is. And we've led with the Israel Relations Normalization Act, the Defend Act, and the Maritime Act. So far, these have been focused mostly on security and diplomatic issues, but now we're excited to introduce very soon the House companion to what's in the Senate, the Regional Integration and Normalization Act of 2023, which will address a host of issues. And I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues on both sides to make sure this happens. We'll establish a presidential envoy for the Accords and provide funds to support the Accords, promote interfaith and scientific collaboration, create a Young Middle East Leaders Program, and promote industrial development, improve cybersecurity coordination, and so much else. So this is a great moment marking 3 years of the Abraham Accords, but we're at the early phases. The possibilities are endless. The Accords 3 years ago created a new paradigm in the Middle East, and as we move forward, we're seeing that that paradigm is only the beginning. I look forward to creating more paradigm shifts and creating more opportunities for a bright and prosperous future for the region. Thank you very much. And do I introduce Dean? Dean will come right up.
Thank you, Brad, for that warm and extraordinary introduction. And to Will, to Oren, to the Talpins Foundation, the Atlantic Council, and N7, thank you. I'll make my remarks brief, but I want to reflect on a trip we just took, my dear friend and colleague Joe Wilson and I, one of our other colleagues, to Israel, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia just last week. For me, as a young Jewish guy growing up in this country, if you had told me that there would be peace between any country in the region and Israel, I would have said you're out of your minds. I would have said if I ever took a trip to Saudi Arabia, you'd be out of your mind. And what I discovered is the most fertile ground I've ever seen in my lifetime, the potential for peace and prosperity and security in a region that has been so devoid of it for so long, remarkable. It also changed my preconceptions and a reminder to all of us who believe so deeply in diplomacy that until we see, smell, touch a place ourselves, till we sit face to face with another human being, we can't do diplomacy through phones and through the written word. We have to do it by going, seeing, breaking bread, and believing. And the time is right. A couple of analogies. I went to Vietnam for the first time in my life in March of this year. It's been an extraordinary year for me. I lost my father in the Vietnam War in 1969. If you had told me that I would return to Vietnam 50 years later and be greeted with warmth and love and affection and forgiveness, I would have said, you're out of your minds. And that's exactly what I was greeted with. If the United States and Vietnam can affect that rapprochement that has occurred, even with President Biden there just this week, surely we can do the same in a region that has suffered from the same challenges. And I reflect on the Saudis having sent troops to fight Israel in both 1948 and 1973, about 50 years ago the last time. The time is right. Not only is it possible, it's necessary. And the other analogy is also Russia. I never would have imagined that Vladimir Putin's ridiculous and offensive and illegal invasion of Ukraine would actually result in Finland and Sweden joining NATO. Just the opposite of what he wanted. And now we have Iran, which, despite our great challenges and the fear and the threat that it presents, has created a similar opportunity for peace in a region that has been so devoid of it. And if that is what brings other countries together, so be it. I'm thrilled by the possibility. When I was in Israel with my friend Joe Wilson, and we met with the Moroccan and Bahraini ambassadors to the State of Israel, it was like out of the Twilight Zone, for those of you who remember that show, but in a good way, a beautiful way. So I just want to say thank you to all of you who believe, to the Trump administration for initiating what I think is going to be a historic, important legacy for all of us. And now to this administration and to future ones, to world leaders, to all of us who in ways big and small play a role, heartfelt gratitude. I've never been so inspired, so hopeful, and so grateful in my entire life. And if I can see peace being made in the Middle East, perhaps along with my friends Joe Wilson, Brad Schneider, and so many others who believe in decency, respect, and bipartisanship, we can have a similar peace accord here in the U.S. Congress. Love you all. Thanks for what you do. Heartfelt gratitude. And now I turn it over to my friend, Representative Joe Wilson, the chairman of the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia Subcommittee.
And ladies and gentlemen, and additionally, I want to thank the Atlantic Council and the dedicated participants in the Tappins Foundation. And following the ranking member, Dean Phillips, I have one word: amen. And so, and hey, all you hear about are fights between Republicans and Democrats. We can't agree on time of day. But you're going to see that that's not the case here today, and that indeed, we work together, and I'm just grateful. With Congressman Schneider, he and I work together promoting the relationship with the Republic of Bulgaria. We work together on other different issues, and then I'm really looking forward to all of you hearing from Congresswoman Kathy Manning, all the way from the very great state adjacent to South Carolina known as North Carolina. So we still call it that. But again, you're going to see people working together. And indeed, as chairman of the House Foreign Affairs, Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia Subcommittee, serving with the ranking member, Dean Phillips, and I'm grateful to recognize the success on the 3rd anniversary of the Abraham Accords on September the 15th. Such an achievement, sadly, achieved in total contrast to this week of the remembrance that we've had of the murderous attacks of September the 11th. And so the good that we can think of is the Abraham Accords. Under the leadership of President Donald Trump, this historic agreement between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, the United States, and later Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan represents the most significant step toward a stable and positive Arab-Israeli relationship in modern history. It marked the first public normalization of relations between an Arab country and Israel since Jordan in 1994, following the Egypt-Israel normalization of 1979. In June, I promoted the bipartisan U.S.-Israel Partnership and Abraham Accords Enhancement Act of 2023, which reauthorizes key cooperative programs between the United States and Israel and fosters the utilization of existing programs to help expand the Abraham Accords. Yesterday, I was grateful to meet with His Excellencies, the very capable individuals, Foreign Minister and also the Ambassador of the Kingdom of Bahrain. It was just a very meaningful meeting that Dean and I both had with people who just, it's such an inspiration. And any of you who have the opportunity to visit the Kingdom of Bahrain, I had to point out to them that my perception of Bahrain, I previously represented Hilton Head Island. I told them it was Hilton Head on steroids. So it's very impressive. We discussed the importance of hope for the young people as we pursue the goal of peace for the people of the Middle East, and it's critical for the accords that are utilized to facilitate startups and economic opportunity for young people. And I'd like to point out a personal reason for my appreciation of the people of Israel is that I grew up in what we call the holy city of Charleston, South Carolina. And the reason that we identify at the time of the American Revolution, the largest Jewish population in the New World was in Charleston, South Carolina. The first provincial constitution to recognize Judaism as a religion was the Provincial Constitution of South Carolina. The first Jewish American elected official was in the Provincial Assembly of South Carolina, and sadly, the first Jewish American patriot killed in the Revolution was in Charleston, South Carolina, and that's the environment I grew up in. In closing, our thoughts and prayers with the people of Morocco at this tragic time as they recover from the earthquake. In addition, we've had our appreciation and sympathy to the people of Turkey, too, for the incredible earthquake that they suffered. And Dean and I were able, with Congresswoman Victoria Spartz, to deliver a resolution to the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Turkish Parliament expressing sympathy for our really appreciated NATO ally. At this time, I'm really grateful that Congresswoman Kathy Manning from the very distinguished state of North Carolina, a very dedicated member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, will now proceed. Congresswoman Kathy Manning.
everyone. Sorry, here's my mic. My name is David Makowski. I'm a senior fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy and director of the project on Arab-Israel relations. I'm also an adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, known as SAIS to many of you. I worked in the Office of the Secretary of State a few years back on Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. I also want to express my condolences to the people of Morocco for this horrific tragedy and hope the world comes together to do what's possible for Morocco at this very difficult time. I also would like to echo something that I think a few of members of Congress just talked about, that this is the week that talks about the worst fears and the best hopes of the Middle East. 9/11 being Monday, the Abraham Accords anniversary being Wednesday, and today, I should add, being the, as was mentioned, is the 30th anniversary of the Oslo Accords, bringing the two national movements, Israelis and Palestinians, together here on the White House lawn. And being there on that day, it was very inspirational. So this is definitely a big week of commemoration, and let's hope it's going to be helpful as we all go forward, wanting for a better future for the Middle East. As this panel, I'm very honored that the Atlantic Council asked me to moderate this session, so I want to thank my friends at the Atlantic Council, Will Wexler, Jonathan Panikoff, Yulia, everyone here, and the Talpins Foundation. We've got a very group of distinguished panelists. I'd say a heavy dosage of the Carolinas, it's fair to say. But these are people who are really immersed. There was no kind of sectoralism here. These are people who are very immersed in the issue, and I don't have to reintroduce Congressman Wilson, who was the chair of the MENA, the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia Subcommittee. As he's been introduced, we're going to want to hear from him about his trip to the Middle East. Also, the Honorable Kathy Manning is someone I've known for many years, Democrat from North Carolina. She's been in the House since 2021. She's the vice-ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee and member also of the MENA, the Middle East Subcommittee, and co-chair of the House Bipartisan Task Force on Combating Anti-Semitism. Each have a very long bio, and I refer you to the Atlantic Council's website. They'll give you more details. I just don't want to take up time. And another one is an old friend of mine, Terry Wolf. We've been to many conferences together. He's the Lieutenant General. Terry Wolf, we want to thank him all for his service to our country. He'd been in the military for 34 years, and he's now the senior director at the NSC, the National Security Council, dealing with the Middle East at the White House. He was the deputy special presidential envoy for the Global Coalition against ISIS in 2015, and we're very honored that Terry is with us as well. So there's just so much, and I do want to say, I don't want to be remiss, for those of you watching this in live stream, and even if you're here, that there's a way to, to go to this, askac.org, or just do the QR code. And that is if you have a question. We're trying to compress a lot in just a few minutes, so I can't promise that we'll get to every question, but I'll try my best to reflect as much as I can. There's so much to get to. Maybe, Terry, we start with you and the view from the White House. And how do you see, look, everyone's talking about the hope of the Abraham Accords and what it represents for the region. And can you just speak to us, a bit broadly about, how is this making a contribution to regional security from the White House's point of view? Then I want to ask you about some specifics, but first we'll start with something general.
David, thanks, and thank you, Congresswoman. It's a pleasure to be here, and really an honor, so thank you for the opportunity, Will, to coax me into this. I guess first and foremost, I kind of look at the Abraham Accords as an incredible foundation, an incredible building block. And I went back and looked at all the documents associated with the signing ceremony in the former administration, and there were two sentences that really struck me. And the first was in the first paragraph. It says, "We, the undersigned, recognize the importance of maintaining and strengthening peace in the Middle East and around the world based on mutual understanding and coexistence, as well as respect for human dignity, freedom, including religious freedom." And then the second sentence is that I highlights the last sentence in the signing document. "We pursue a vision of peace, security, and prosperity in the Middle East and around the world." So I think that those two sentences really capture the essence of the foundation of the Abraham Accords. So how do you build upon that? Well, the Trump administration laid a foundation. The Biden administration has moved forward with the help of Congress to empower that effort. And it's designed around the task the president gave us for a stable and prosperous Middle East. And so everything we have done has been focused on that. And his vision was laid out in his Jeddah +3 speech last year in Saudi Arabia. And then it was built upon on a document called our National Security Strategy, where we talked a lot about our focus and our energy and the key imperatives. And the Abraham Accords is tied into all of this. So how do you move that forward? Well, in last July in Saudi Arabia, there was a little thing called, I guess it was in Israel, there was a gathering of leaders of 4 countries. And they came together and did I2U2. And that technology agreement was designed about water. It's about technology. It brought the leaders of India, Israel, the Emirates, and the United States together. Now, I would then suggest that you move forward beyond that. In this past weekend in India, on the margins of the G20, the president and about 7 other leaders came together and signed an MOU that was designed to talk about a transportation, energy, and high technology corridor spanning from India to the Gulf over water, and then rail across the Arabian Peninsula, and then more water linkages through a northern corridor that takes you up into Europe. All designed to have an energy, transportation, green hydrogen, high technology, internet corridor. And I can't think of a better way to describe a way that the administration and our country can move forward building on the Abraham Accords.
So do you think, Terry, that on that point of the infrastructure, there will be, I don't know, the technical word, nodes to Israel as well? That, I mean, because the focus has been more on linking the Gulf and Arab states and then on to Europe, and it's been seen in the press as somewhat as a counterweight to what China is doing in the Middle East. So will you be able to get under this vision? You'll be able to get on a train somewhere in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Haifa, and be able to hopefully go all the way deep into the Gulf as you see it?
Yeah, I think it in both directions, right? And so you think about the old Orient Express, and then you fix the rail lines, because there's a great deal of existing rail infrastructure in the Middle East already that can be built upon. But it's also about the movement of things across water, and it's also building upon the markets in India as well as the markets in Europe. And how do you tie all this together? And it seems to us that this is an incredible opportunity by the number of nations that I mentioned, but also by the European Union, Germany, France, and others that were part of this effort.
And hey, lightning's going to strike, and that is breaking news. Republicans actually agree on this, and we can work together. And actually, you're being too humble, and that is that already the administration achieved an agreement between Lebanon and Israel for offshore drilling in the Mediterranean, and then putting it all together, that would result in oil being shipped to Egypt to be refined in Egypt to be then piped to Italy, and so. What you just described, again, you're being a little bit humble. You should have begun with the original agreement of Lebanon and Israel. And so, again, indeed, we should be working together. And this is an example.
Kathy, you would agree with that too?
So let me just add one thing. First of all, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you to the Atlantic Council for having us. I just want to say that my colleague, Chairman Joe Wilson, and I agree entirely on the issues that we're addressing today. We really speak in one voice with 2 different accents. from the two different Carolinas. But this is an area where there is robust agreement among members of our Middle East Subcommittee, among members of the Greater Foreign Affairs Committee, and I think within Congress. And we've already seen some important legislation pass in these areas that will build on security cooperation. Look, the move of Israel out of European Command into the Central Command was critically important. It should have taken place years ago, but it was the region was not as welcoming to Israel as it should have been. But once there was an acknowledgement that it was important for others in the region to have that cooperation with Israel, and what Israel brings to that cooperation, the move to Central Command was critically important. And some of the legislation that we have passed in Congress builds on that and fosters the security cooperation. But it won't stop with security cooperation. There will be other forms of cooperation. And as my colleague Brad Schneider mentioned this morning, we had a meeting with young professionals who are participating in I don't want to call them exchange programs, trips together where they are getting to know each other and working on issues of real substance, where they're focusing on how do we improve workforce participation, how do we improve energy security, how do we access water. Focusing on those things and working together will take the focus off of issues of conflict and put them on areas where we can see cooperation and growth of these countries together.
Well, that's very exciting, and then both of you agree. You might not be different parts of Carolina, but you all agree on the thrust, and that's wonderful. And maybe, Terry, back to you, because what we just heard from Congresswoman Manning and Congressman Wilson about the sense of, on this, there's consensus. The fact that now CENTCOM has this component, I mean, again, you might have thought this would be the messianic age, that here you have all these Gulf leaders, military and Israel, all sitting together, looking at the same screens, whether there's a drone strike coming from wherever it might be in a more unstable part of the Middle East. But as a military guy, how is the dream, the reality of CENTCOM looked, and these exercises that have been going on at air and sea? I'm just wondering, from a military point of view, when you look at it, how does that add up?
Well, first of all, they're kind of a retired military guy,
Yeah.
but anyhow, phenomenal opportunity. The fact that Israel was moved into the CENTCOM space was enormously beneficial. And if you don't believe me, you can just go look at the CENTCOM Twitter site and see all the movement of General Kurilla, their commander, who was like the Energizer bunny out there. The good news is there was an incredible exercise program ongoing before that movement. And you mentioned in your introduction of me kind of my de-ISIS background, but a lot of the work we did there was building a global coalition. And so we leveraged the lessons learned from the global coalition to defeat ISIS, because our military friends across all these different nations who came together in over 70 countries to defeat ISIS, many of them put forces and liaison officers in a good number of the CENTCOM headquarters all across the Middle East. So we had a very aggressive multilateral program, and then you built upon that with bilateral exercises. Exercises, as an example, that occur between Bahrain and the United States with Fifth Fleet. Exercises that occurred this recent January, an exercise series called Juniper Oak between the Israelis and the United States, which is the largest exercise that we've ever done. And so then you take this multilateral approach, you build upon things that Fifth Fleet has done with the 38 nations that have come together as part of the naval task forces, and you work to expand that, and then you work to incorporate other partners. So there's an incredible foundation, is probably the theme of the day, but it's an incredible foundation out in the military spaces as well for our Department of Defense to build on these combined and multilateral exercises and bring other partners in. Bright Star is ongoing for the last 2 weeks, and it finishes in the next couple of days. Has upward in the neighborhood of 38 participants and 7,000 soldiers from different nations participating with both Egypt and the United States. So just a handful of examples of opportunity, and it's all about integrating better, and it's also about deterrence.
That's right. Can I just, I was remiss by not saying we're sorry that the Bahraini ambassador to the United States is not with us. The Crown Prince of Bahrain is now in town and is, we can understand that he couldn't join us. We'll be hearing a video message later in the conference. But I want to go to you, Congressman Wilson, if I can, for a moment. You're hot off the press. You just came back from the Middle East. My understanding is you had dinner with the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia. And, the breaking news is the effort by the administration on trying to do this, what it looks like. And we understand that Terry's constrained by what he can say, but an old journalist in me feels I got to try anyway. But first, let me go to you, Congressman. What looks like a mega deal of a U.S.-Saudi defense treaty and Saudi-Israeli normalization. So you, just having met the Saudi foreign minister in Riyadh last week or so, could you just give us a sense of your impressions from being there and how this could contribute to this mosaic of the Abraham Accords?
Absolutely, and as I begin, I want to point out one of my sons actually served Bright Star in Egypt. And my two oldest sons served in Iraq, and my third son served in Egypt, and my youngest son served for a year in Afghanistan. So appreciate your military service. I never got beyond Fort Stewart, Georgia. But as we look at what's ahead, we first met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and he was so positive with Ranking Member Dean Phillips, and it was just inspiring to be with him. Then we went on to Ankara and met with the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Parliament and really thanked them for their ongoing efforts for Sweden to ultimately become part of NATO, and that was positive. And then to meet with the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia was particularly meaningful to me in that the first thing I thanked him is that signing the agreement for $37 billion worth of Boeing aircraft, 787 Dreamliners, which were made in Charleston, South Carolina. And I understand they may double the order. That would be very good. But we then discussed, indeed, the efforts ongoing of working toward a relationship. And in fact, the very first hearing that we had of the Middle East Subcommittee was to review the success of the Abraham Accords. And then my concluding statement was that I look forward to continuing this particular hearing when there is an agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which I believe will occur. And so I'm just really, it'd be mutually advantageous and to both countries and to the region. And they're ironing, I believe, they're ironing out details as we speak. But it clearly would be so mutually advantageous for both countries in the region.
That's great. And Congresswoman Manning, your thoughts on the Saudi initiative of the administration?
Look, the Abraham Accords, we all believe, has been transformational for the region. If Saudi Arabia joins, it will be even that much more transformational. So I don't want to jump ahead of myself. We'd like to see what the components of the deal might be, make sure that they are not only in the interests of the region, but also in the U.S. interests. But of course, we have to say that adding Saudi Arabia will make an enormous difference. And also, we haven't specified, but all of this will help create a bulwark against Iran. And Iran continues to be the largest state sponsor of terror, not just in the region, but around the globe. And even today, they are supplying drones to Russia in its appalling war against Ukraine. So anything we can do to create relationships and stability and maybe cause Iran to be more hesitant in some of its malign activity would be a benefit for all of us.
That's great. And again, I understand, and the audience should understand the constraints that Terry Wolf is under as being a member of the administration on something that is, it seems like a high priority, but obviously is, they can't get into a lot of details. But can you say just in broad brush strokes, like the strategic rationale? Like, given how the U.S. looks at China and the Middle East, how that impacts the president's thinking. Congresswoman Manning talked about the Iranian component. I mean, if I was, getting up in Tehran and I saw that the Saudis and the United States have just joined together, and there's a Saudi-Israeli normalization piece to this too, this would give me pause. So can you give us just a sense of the strategic? I'm not going to ask you the details, with Congressman's right that they were just ironing out details, but just the broad brushstrokes.
So listen, there is a pathway for this, and the details will come together over time, I think. It'll take a lot of serious discussion. We're at the discussion phase now, not really the negotiation phase. So again, it's like taking a big clump of clay and you're shaping it. And so the clay is starting to get shaped a little bit. I'm not sure what the object will look like. We know what it wants to be, what we want it to be. For all the reasons you mentioned, David, I mean, you mentioned the issue about we want the Middle East to look, frankly, to the West.
Yeah.
And we recognize the importance of trade, energy flow, all across the world, and the importance of the global economy and what is so critical about the Middle East and the free flow of energy and so on and so forth. The other aspect of this is the incredible investment power of the Gulfies, right? And so they have the ability to, with their sovereign wealth funds, to certainly help move us forward in these high technology spaces and many artificial intelligence and a whole number of other areas that they are incredibly interested in. And so how do we bring our interests together, Israeli interests, other interests together in a way that makes sense? The other aspect about the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is, again, that opens up the Muslim world in very interesting ways that we know are absolutely critical. So that's why this is so important. It's incredibly complicated, and folks will continue working and shaping this. We really don't have the terms yet. We're not ready for anything to be signed. There'll be consultations here with the Hill and with others, and we have a long journey.
Can you say the goal is a treaty at this point, maybe even by the first quarter of the year?
I can't make that sort of prediction.
Okay, that's what we hear. That's what we hear.
Hey, I appreciate your encouragement.
Go ahead. Congressman, did you
Well,
say?
hey, I appreciate too, Congressman Manning bringing up about the threat of Iran, because hey, we're in a conflict we did not start, and that is dictators, dictatorships with rule of gun opposing democracy's rule of law, and it began February the 24th, 2021, with the war criminal Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and then the encouragement by President Xi, and then the spectacle yesterday of Kim Jong-un. And of course, to me, the significance of the success of the people of Taiwan, of Ukraine for territorial integrity is a deterrence to the Chinese Communist Party takeover of Taiwan. But then it comes back, indeed, to the regime in Tehran's intent of death to America, death to Israel. So all of this ties together, and I wish you well.
That's right. Okay, let me just ask, just from the congressional angle, because we have with this bipartisan caucus, which is striking. This is one of the rare issues where everyone is coming together, and as has been said, I think both by Congressman Schneider and Congressman Phillips, it's happening, the bipartisanship in the House and in the Senate, and that is striking to those of us who are very worried about polarization in our country. What other role do you both see as to use your congressional oversight role to leverage it in a way to further bring about cooperation? We've heard about some really exciting ideas in this session, whether it's the corridor of connectivity, if it's more CENTCOM, the tantalizing prospect of this mega deal with all its complications. We could speak for hours about how's it going to look on the civilian nuclear piece. Is there going to be a Palestinian component? Like I said, today is the 30th anniversary of the Oslo Accords. I have a feeling we're not going to get a lot of detail here, but this is what we hear, that those are going to be pieces here that I'm sure will be debated. And for this to work, if it is going to be a treaty like we hear, it is going to require both sides of the aisle to come together. And in a time where it's not easy to get Republicans and Democrats to come together. And I know the two of you are very committed to that, but how do you see Congress coming together to bring support if it's, again, we have to talk about the details, the devil's in the details. So, but I mean, how do you see that happening given all the polarization going on in our country?
Well, actually, on the Foreign Affairs Committee, we have a terrific positive leadership with Chairman Mike McCall, and he works very closely indeed with former Chairman Greg Meeks. I always like to point out Greg Meeks he represents Queens, but he was born in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And so we have this relationship of working together on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Additionally, the Armed Services Committee, indeed, Congressman Mike Rogers is the chair, working with Ranking Member Adam Smith. We'll be voting this week on the National Defense Authorization Act, which includes significant provisions for our working with our allies in the region. And so that's very important. And I'm hoping with Kathy and Brad and Dean's leadership that this would be a bipartisan vote too. And so, but it comes up this week, and
We have some things we can discuss to
Well,
make
oh my
that,
God,
to
yeah.
create a bipartisan
oh my
vote
goodness,
there.
I can't believe there's disagreement. But anyway, but seriously, we can be working together. And I want to repeat again something that should be such an achievement, and that is the agreement between Lebanon and Israel. Here we have one of the great countries in the world called Lebanon, which doesn't exist in terms of a government. And so by having a financial helpline of the money from the offshore drilling, but then the bizarre circumstance of the oil coming from Israel to be refined in Egypt in our lifetime and then sent by pipeline to Italy. Who would ever imagine? So that, and that should be another one of the examples, the Abraham Accords and that agreement and others that should be highlighted.
Well, good. But it's good to know also that all roads come from the Carolinas. That's so. It's like Congresswoman Manning. How do you see it in terms of Congress coming together and using its influence? This is one area of bipartisanship, we hope. And do you think it'll be able, I mean, like I said, I'm sure there'll be a debate on if it's civilian nuclear energy to deal with the Saudis and how that's going to look like, and what is the Palestinian component of this deal, which we expected is, because as Terry said, and it shouldn't go unnoticed by the audience, that the idea is that it's not just with Saudi Arabia, but it goes also in the Muslim world beyond even the Arab world. I mean, Indonesia, Malaysia, there are a lot of these big countries that do not have diplomatic relations with Israel. We tend to think of the Abraham Accords as very just Arabs and Israelis, which would be fantastic. But imagine if you could do that and plus. So I don't know. I respect the constraints of Terry Wolf, because he's not going to tell me. But I do want you to look for those hints that he said out there. But Kathy, over to you.
When you talk about areas where Congress does come together, the importance of our leading the role of greater cooperation in the Middle East is an area where we come together. The importance of supporting a strong U.S.-Israel relationship is an area where we come together. If you question that, all you have to do is look at the vote on funding for the Israel's Iron Dome program. So these are areas where we do have a great deal of bipartisanship in the Congress. When you go to our hearings in the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Middle East Subcommittee, you see that we don't agree on every single issue, but overall there is great agreement. And there are things we can do in addition to oversight hearings, and that is funding for things that would encourage greater cooperation and the growth of the cooperation among the Abraham Accords, particularly among the young people, the people-to-people connections. We saw examples of that this morning, and I'm hoping that we can foster that with more funding going forward.
Let me just ask one question that I think is on some people's minds, and it's a delicate one, and that is, you've seen a very active protest movement going on in Israel right now. And in some ways, I think, for some it would be seen as this is Israel's gift to itself for its 75th birthday, that it is engaged in such a robust discussion about democracy. And without getting into any of the partisanship over there, we have enough partisanship over here. But I'm sure I get asked this around the United States when I speak, and I got that over there when I was in Israel and Ramallah, where I just was this summer in the West Bank. I do get people asking me also on, is there somehow going to be a link between that, that whole issue and this effort? There are indications that the Prime Minister might want to take this issue off the table for now because he feels that it interferes, and this is a legacy issue for him to get, if he could get this Saudi Arabia deal by being a part of it. So but if I'm right, that this is ultimately going to come to the US Congress for a vote, people are going to wonder, are these issues going to get entangled? Maybe the Prime Minister will be able to move that whole issue aside and say, I'm not getting involved in that anymore. Let's focus on the Middle East, on regional stability, on the Abraham Accords, on something we all care about, and focus on that and put that aside. But I do get people asking me, is Congress going to link these issues? Are they going to get entangled in some way? Or are we going if the Prime Minister is not successful in putting this issue aside? And because, the administration has tried to say, hey, our concern for the security of Israel is unshakable, it's unbreakable, it goes on for decades. I know that, and that's been said by both parties. I want to say that. But I just wonder if this issue, if it comes up if it complicates things, as we all want to improve regional stability, and we all want, obviously, what's good for the United States in terms of our own interest with the Saudis and trying to bring greater stability to that part of the world. So maybe two members of Congress, if you have any thoughts.
The first thing I think we need to keep in mind is if you want to look at what a democracy looks like, you look at what's going on in Israel. Certainly, I can't think of another place in the Middle East where you could have, are we up to 75, 80 weeks of protests, massive numbers of Israelis protesting peacefully. There is no freer press than the press in Israel. So if you want to see a vibrant democracy, you look at what's going on in Israel. If what you're suggesting is that Benjamin Netanyahu is playing three-dimensional chess, and the way he's going to get out of all of this is by creating that bringing Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords, all I can say is, in this time of year, Dayenu.
It's enough. That's, for those who don't know what Hebrew means, it's enough. It's associated with Passover.
Here, thank you. Hey, but again, ladies and gentlemen, Kathy and I agree, and I would like to point out, and I believe it was Margaret Thatcher who said democracy is the worst system in the world except for all the others. And then we have an example, though, of actually multiplication of freedoms and access through division. So that's not necessarily negative, and in particularly with the level of protest in Israel, they are certainly a concern, but it's democracy and 75th anniversary. Also, we need to recognize on October 29th is going to be the 100th anniversary of democracy of all places in Turkey. And so, and then as an example of non-democracy, there have been 4,000 protests in the Islamic Republic of Iran, and how brave the people there. But in the meantime, it hadn't gotten the coverage, but 550 people in the last year since the murder of the young lady on the street. 550 people have been murdered, particularly young people, and I've seen pictures of the people murdered. Additionally, they have had 20,000 people arrested. So what a contrast. You have of Iran, a authoritarian theocratic state and dictatorship, as opposed to what we support of Israel and Turkey.
And maybe I'll just end with you, Terry, if I could. Look, there was just a meeting in New York with Defense Minister of Israel Gallant, with Brett McGurk. I'm sure you were there, and Barbara Leaf from the State Department, and the rumors of a meeting with the president at the UN General Assembly with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I just want to know how I've felt talking to the Prime Minister's office. They were very hopeful about working with the administration on Saudi, on deepening the Abraham Accords. this will be the first meeting. I know they've known each other for 40 years. These two people, they're no strangers to each other. They have a long-standing friendship. But how hopeful are you of this high-level U.S.-Israel engagement being able to give a kind of a boost to your diplomatic initiative that you're trying to work out?
Well, again, we have the boost from President Biden, obviously. I think their calls, their meetings are always important, and it certainly empowers those that are doing the bidding of the leaders. And as you know from reporting, we've talked to senior Israelis and Israeli advisors who have come here to Washington, who've talked to not only members of Congress but also to Jake Sullivan and to Brett McGurk and our team. So we have great insight into the Israeli thinking, and we have spoken very frankly to them about how this whole normalization idea is moving forward. And that's important. There's a line of communication there that we keep very vibrant, and it's fulsome. So I'm encouraged by that. We go into the high week of the UN next week, so all the diplomats from the world are showing, and world leaders are coming into town, obviously, as well. And there'll be an incredible amount of diplomacy that is ongoing on all issues, including this.
So I want you all to join hands and thank this magnificent panel that we just heard. Thank you so much. And we wish great success at Abraham Accords. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our People-to-People and Cultural Engagement panel. Before we kick off, I would like to welcome Congressman Wagner, who is also a co-chair of the Abraham Accords Caucus, to share a few remarks with us.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Very, very much. And good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure to join you as we joyfully celebrate the third anniversary of the signing of the absolutely transformative Abraham Accords. I'm indeed Ann Wagner, and I represent Missouri's 2nd District, which is basically the greater suburbs of St. Louis County in Congress. Alongside my good friends, David Trone here, and Brad Schneider and Kathy McMorris Rogers in the House, and then obviously our U.S. Senators Rosen, Ernst, Booker, and Langford. I'm proud to help lead with this team in a bipartisan and bicameral, and I must say, very effective Abraham Accords caucus. It was my fellow Missourian, President Harry Truman, was the first to stand up in recognition of Israel at its founding in 1948. And who could anticipate some 75 years later that we would see Arabs and Israelis and Americans standing up together to reject the horrors and tragedies of anti-Semitism and conflict and take concrete steps towards lasting peace in the Middle East. For decades, Iran and its terrorist proxies benefited from what I'd call a deep rift between Israel and Arab nations, a dynamic that elevated voices of hate and impeded progress across the entire region. The Accords are enabling signatory countries to break out of that cycle and dysfunction and violence and work together for advanced regional priorities. Our caucus is focused on building a robust legislative foundation for implementing, deepening, and expanding, I'd say, these agreements. The Israel Relations Normalization Act, which I championed with Representative Schneider, directs the United States to work together with Abraham Accord countries on problems that will bring, I think, real quality of life improvements to the citizens of these nations. And it's things like water security and sustainable agriculture, education, economic development, and most importantly, ending anti-Semitism. And the caucus's Defend Act will kickstart the creation of an integrated air and missile defense capacity to deter an aggressive and quite erratic Iran. We've already worked on some new initiatives to follow up on these successes, such as Chairman McMorris Rogers' Maritime Act, which would require better regional cooperation on all maritime security. While it's critical that we build on the momentum of the accords and plan for the future, I want to be sure to recognize the tangible benefits that these agreements have already brought. You know, the leaders of the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan risked triggering the ire of radical actors in the region by recognizing Israel. But it is crystal clear that they did the right thing for their people. Already, the accords have unleashed pent-up economic potential. There are record levels of tourism, new embassies and trade offices across the region, an explosion in joint enterprises, especially in some very critical fields like healthcare and agriculture, water management, education, and even tech innovation. More than a dozen new flight routes are enabling hundreds of thousands of Israeli tourists to travel freely to Arab signatory countries and invest in regional economies. At the opening of the new Israeli embassy in Bahrain, it was less than just, I think, 2 weeks ago, both countries vowed to even increase flights and tourism, investment, and trade between their two nations. Today, Israeli universities now offer coursework in UAE studies, while UAE has opened a new center, the Abrahamic Family Home, to advance tolerance and understanding between Jewish, Christian, and Muslim communities. These are the building blocks, ladies and gentlemen, of prosperity in the region. Nevertheless, Iran's breakneck progress on nuclearization, its increasingly close military ties with Russia, and its absolutely reckless use of terrorist proxies remain a cause for grave concern. The United States must lead the way in building out a security architecture to keep Israel and its partners safe from a nuclear Iran. Our caucus's Defend Act and soon to be, I hope, passed Maritime Act are central to that effort and will ensure the region's air defense and maritime capabilities are ready for the challenge. So at a time of heightened anti-Semitism across the globe and increased Iranian aggression, it is more important than ever that we stand shoulder to shoulder with our Abraham Accord partners and identify opportunities to grow and to strengthen these agreements. I want to thank you all for your time and your insights. I'd also like to thank the Atlantic Council very, very much for convening this important conference and for the Council's work to expand and deepen the Accords, including by working closely with our bicameral Abraham Accords caucus. So I will turn it back over so you may start your panel, and I thank you for your time and your dedication to this wonderful achievement as we celebrate the 3rd anniversary of the Abraham Accords. And I thank you.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Wagner, for your remarks. I want to turn this very quickly to Representative Trone, who is a co-chair of the Abraham Accords Caucus, because I'm very conscious of your time. You have been working very diligently on the Abraham Accords Caucus to bring people together. So what role do you see the United States Congress playing in bridging the gap in understanding, in promoting cultural and educational engagement, basically strengthening these people-to-people ties?
And I appreciate that. I do apologize that Ms. Wagner and myself both have to leave for votes, which they called. Seemed to be a moving target today, but the target is finally settled on the time. Thanks for the Atlantic Council for holding this. I was a member of the Atlantic Council for many years, actually before I ran for Congress. So thank you for your interest in this, and it's fantastic you guys are facilitating this discussion. Since its founding, the Accords have certainly enhanced security, created more economic opportunities, and of course improved diplomacy, through the whole region. But our job, as you said, is far from done. We've got positive momentum. We've got to drive on that. If we don't, we'll lose it. It's our duty as members of Congress to support and strengthen these relationships that are developing in the Accords. By bringing the communities closer together, forging genuine connections across countries and cultures, that's how we get lasting change. Having been to Ramallah numerous times, you certainly understand that there's so much to do, but when people work together, and we belong to one of the chambers of commerce over there, I think it's Judean Chamber of Commerce, we met with also once, and where folks are working side by side, Israeli and Palestinian, they really got to know each other, and when they got to know each other, they got to respect each other, and it took the fear out of those relationships. It was a wonderful thing, moving forward. So we've been proud to support, as Ann mentioned, the Israeli Normalization Act, but really got to engage business leaders. I come out of the business world, and business is a way we can work together, and that's builds relationships, it builds communication. So as a former businessman, I understand the importance of those personal relationships. So encouraging cooperation, business, technology, and of course, leading to innovation. I love the program Connect to Innovate. Those conferences hosted by Israel's Startup Nation Central, those are great and really helped collaboration with the Moroccan and Bahrainian partners, bringing businesses together. So sharing ideas, communicating, that's what's going to move us forward. And I look forward to the future, and we got a long way to go, but this is a great start, and we got to keep expanding the Abraham Group, and that's going to happen, and we got the momentum, so let's build on it. So thank you very much for what you're doing here today.
Thank you very much, Congressman Trone, and thanks particularly for highlighting the role of entrepreneurship. This has a lot of potential, particularly amongst young people in the region, which comprise the vast majority of the population.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll go back to the panel, maybe introduce myself. We had to run very quickly with all the shifting schedules. So my name is Marissa Khurma, and I'm the director of the Middle East program at the Wilson Center. We're delighted to be collaborating with the Atlantic Council and the Abraham Accords Caucus on today's activities commemorating the 3rd anniversary of the Abraham Accords. This panel is about people-to-people engagement and cultural, educational exchanges and interactions, and it is one of the essential pillars of the Abraham Accords and of forging peace between nations. Governments can sign agreements, and security apparatuses and militaries can collaborate, but if the people-to-people component is not addressed, then the challenges will remain, and it will make it more and more difficult to address any common crises that may emerge, or some of the common challenges that the region faces, from climate change to migration, and the list goes on. So I'm really delighted to be moderating this conversation with colleagues from the State Department, starting with Aaron Kayak, who is the Deputy Special Envoy to combat and monitor anti-Semitism at the State Department. And joining us as well is Jeff Anisman, who is the Director of the Public Diplomacy Office at State. So thank you to both of you for joining us today. I wanted to start with you, Jeff, if that's okay, looking at the Abraham Accords and how they've influenced regional integration through various programs. We've heard about some of the scientific exchanges, the educational exchanges that are taking place between Israel and the signatory Arab countries. And with some initiatives, other nationalities are also included. So looking forward, what steps are being taken that those gains remain, but also are built upon, for a sustainable, broader peace and coexistence?
Well, thanks so much, and thanks so much for inviting me to speak here today. Regional integration is tremendously important. We heard today Secretary Blinken spoke at SAIS just down the road here, gave a foundational speech about where public diplomacy, where our diplomatic efforts are coming from and where we're going moving ahead. And he said that the most important thing we're doing right now is integration. He talked about our relationships with other countries being tremendously important, and he highlighted specifically regional integration, including in the Middle East. And so the Abraham Accords are one element he highlighted specifically. There's nothing, no better example of it than that. There are some programs we've already started that are supporting these efforts. I'm the head of the Public Diplomacy Office in the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs at the State Department right now. Our embassy in Bahrain has a fantastic program that's brought together Israelis with Bahrainis and people from many other countries to talk about things like basketball. And lo and behold, we have a new embassy opening. There's all kinds of things happening along these lines, but a lot of it is also looking ahead. And I've served twice at our embassy in Israel, and just came back from Ukraine now, where I spent the past year. And this is what we do at the State Department and in the world of public diplomacy. It's bring people together with exchanges. Sometimes it's bringing people together on exchange programs within a region, and sometimes it's bringing people together here. There are thousands of alumni of our exchange programs who have come to the United States, including hundreds who have won Nobel Prizes. We've got many dozens have become heads of state, and these programs bring people together also from different countries, and I think that will continue to be a key element that we're doing to support the Abraham Accords and to support other elements. But I think sometimes we, in the world of bureaucracy, get kind of used to government contacts, and we're delivering demarches and we're having official meetings. That's important. But the people-to-people element is every bit just as important. The people-to-people element supports the government element, and it results from the government element. So the Negev Forum, N7, all these different projects play a tremendously important role, strengthening educational ties, strengthening scientific ties, strengthening real ties that many of which will happen without government involvement at all once they get going. And I think that's what's going to be absolutely key to make this region function stronger together.
Thank you. And beyond, of course, the various initiatives that the U.S. government is leading, there's also organic work that's being that's taking place in the region, and it's equally important to support many of these civil society organizations such as the Arava Institute, the Echo Peace Middle East, who are looking at the common challenges, not being completely blind to what's happening and on the ground, but also taking a more pragmatic approach about how to work together. So thank you for elaborating on a lot of these programs. Aaron, I want to turn to you with the important work that you do, and Congresswoman Wagner mentioned the rise of anti-Semitism globally. The issue of interfaith dialogue and understanding is essential to ensure respect, to ensure peaceful coexistence. So what policy initiatives, but also legislative measures, are you moving forward to ensure this cooperation between Jewish and Arab communities?
Well, thank you for that question. It's an honor to be here with the members of Congress. As a former staffer, I know how important it is to make that vote. It's an honor to be here with Jeff, and it's an honor to be representing Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt at such a timely event. When Ambassador Lipstadt, after she was unanimously confirmed by the Senate, decided to come into office and decided on her priorities, one of her top priorities, if not her top priority, was engaging in the Middle East region. Her first trip was a historic trip to Saudi Arabia to really raise awareness, to normalize the idea of Jews and the Jewish history in Saudi Arabia. Ambassador Lipstadt, I, and Senior Advisor Ludo Hood have visited the region numerous times, and we plan to visit again before the end of the calendar year. Needless to say, while anti-Semitism is on the rise, our office's remit is relatively narrow, but we found a way to have conversations with these countries that doesn't get caught up on the geopolitical conflict. And it sounds kind of funny to say at an N7 Atlantic Council event, but I think sometimes, especially when engaging newer countries to normalization or the Abraham Accords, we get caught up on the label of Abraham Accords or normalization or peace. But what's really important is engagement on what it means to be a safe place for Jews and other religious minorities, and not to export anti-Semitism, and in some cases to have strong relations with the State of Israel specifically. So I think it's important when talking about each of these countries not to take a broad brush with one label or one phrase, and to engage each of them in the way that they are most comfortable, and in a way that they, almost without exception from the countries we've talked about so far, are looking to make progress. And to take countries that have been the leading exporters of anti-Semitism and bring them onto the positive side of the ledger, that's real progress, and to gradually shift the attitudes towards Jews, and again, in some cases, Israel. In addition, of course, Jeff knows this, and our strong relationship with NEA. We can only push so far as governments, and we know since the founding of the State of Israel, and as Congressman Wagner said, President Truman's bold leadership on this issue to recognize Israel, that it's important to also bring the people along. You know, a cold peace with cold calculations on strategic interests only lasts so far. And what I can say, I know what Ludo can say, what Ambassador Lipstadt would say in our visits to Saudi Arabia, UAE, Morocco, and others, is that there's a warmth there. And let me just take a moment as part of that warmth and friendship. I know all of our thoughts are with what's happening in Morocco right now. It really is horrific. We just came up on the anniversary of 9/11, and you know, from the reports this morning, we're approaching that level of catastrophe. And let me just say one more thing. When we engage with these countries, we don't go there to wag our finger. As Secretary Blinken said this morning, and he continues to say, you know, we are not coming to other countries to talk about anti-Semitism or democracy because we are perfect, but in fact it's because we are not, and that we can work together to solve these problems, both here at home and work with our partners and friends abroad together to address the rising tide of hate, especially anti-Semitism, in the case of our office.
Thank you, Aaron. And as you mentioned, you know, the different labels and frames, it's crucial to, with this initial step of having these conversations, to put people at ease with the framing perhaps that they are most comfortable with, particularly when we're talking about you know, a region that has seen this separation between societies, different narratives that people grew up with. I am from the region and from here, and it's taken a lot of work and a lot of conversations to understand, to agree to disagree, but also to respect. So thank you for shedding light on that. Jeff, I want to go back to you, sort of looking ahead at some of the strategies and initiatives that are in the pipeline for the United States government to lead. Of course, you said that the U.S. government cannot lead all of the people-to-people initiatives, but what's in the pipeline, and what are the main issues that are the crux of some of these initiatives?
Well, I think at a very concrete level, there are a lot of areas we'll be able to push things along and facilitate things in areas like university, partnerships between different countries in the region, in areas like sports, food, economics. But at the end of the day, why do we do this? We do this because the United States really has a unique power to convene and to conduct statecraft and to move these kinds of efforts ahead. If you look at what we've done for regional integration, there are so many US successes. The easiest, most obvious ones are after 2 world wars in Europe, with the Marshall Plan, with other efforts we pushed for regional integration in Europe. We helped our European friends regionally integrate. That made for a stronger Europe, it made for a stronger world, and it made for a stronger and more secure and more prosperous United States. And so what we've done in Europe, what we've done in Asia and Africa and elsewhere, I think we also need to do in the Middle East. And part of that is government to government, part of that is really people to people. Many people say that the Middle East right now is the least regionally integrated region in the world. Well, that's great, because that means there's good work for us to do here. And it is so, so important. So to a personal note, I just started my current job. I'm a career diplomat. My last job, I was the counselor for public affairs at our embassy in Ukraine, which was tremendously rewarding and emotional experience for me, and I want to keep supporting Ukraine. Well, this world is so, so intertwined right now. And as the Secretary said today, what we're doing in one region has an impact in another. I care that right now, our work in the Middle East is essential for our work in Europe, in Ukraine. And the work that's happening there has profound implications for our region as well. That's the same for Asia. It's the same for all these different countries. And I think that's why Secretary Blinken today talked about interlocking relationships when he talked about the diplomatic geography that we're really embracing now. It's not just as simple as a program or a list of programs or a list of meetings or initiatives. It goes quite a bit beyond that. There are a lot more dimensions and a lot more time involved. And that's one reason I'm so happy that we're here. We are here with an organization, the Atlantic Council, which is doing great work in our region. Also, we had fantastic Atlantic Council support on thinking about our policy in Ukraine and elsewhere. We had really, really useful visits. We have Congress working together with the executive branch. And I was pleased to see one of the members of Congress I met in Ukraine just a couple of months ago up here on stage talking about how he supports what's happening in the Middle East. There's just so many different connections and so many places for people to be involved and working together, and the sky's the limit. The more we do, the more options we're going to have in the future, and I'm very excited about it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Jeff. So Aaron, I want to turn to how important it is to bring religious leaders together in our communities, in the 3 different Abrahamic faiths. Religious leaders are important. They set the tone for the values that we grow up with. So what are some of the initiatives underway to also ensure that religious leaders are having these conversations, particularly given that this region is home to the 3 Abrahamic faiths?
Of course, I mean, unfortunately, as an office headed by a historian who's now ambassador, we know all too well how much religious fervor can stoke the flames of hate throughout history, and how so much killing has been in the name of what is right religiously. There's, an extra obligation, I think, for religious leaders to bend over backwards to increase coexistence and tolerance. And we see that in the MENA region. Of course, in countries like the UAE, I think Congresswoman Wagner mentioned the Abrahamic House. It really is a powerful statement in and of itself that a Muslim-majority country chose to build a church, a synagogue, and a mosque, all of equal height and of similar materials, but distinct in their own ways. It's such a powerful symbol for what the UAE is pushing. And if you look throughout the region, Morocco, of course, has an indigenous Jewish population, and has Ambassador Lipset's visited there twice, and we're looking forward to doing more work with them, with amazing leaders like Mr. Azulai. And we expect, even coming out of this disaster, that there will be much more we can do on coexistence and the normalization of the Jew. I mean, it's, we of course all know, well, a lot of us here happen to be Jewish, but we also know Jews. And the thing about it is, in some of these countries, some of these people have never met anyone of the Jewish faith. And some of them don't realize that there is a Jewish history in their countries. Now, in countries like Morocco and Bahrain, there is still an indigenous Jewish population, especially Morocco, that continues to thrive. And in Bahrain, they're still quite proud of their local Jewish community, and a synagogue still there. And when you're able to have that conversation, whether it's a Bahraini or Moroccan, and talk about not just the Jewish people, and of course we should be against anti-Semitism, but it's your neighbor, it's your brother who you're not dehumanizing. I know that sounds like a minimum thing, but it has happened throughout history, because that's the first step, right? The first step of a genocide is not the gas chambers. The first step of a genocide is speech, is dehumanizing, is labeling. And we've also seen progress in countries like Saudi Arabia when it comes to their textbooks. And again, we can have a conversation about unconscious bias and unconscious racism and unconscious anti-Semitism here in the United States and elsewhere. But when you talk about children being educated in arithmetic by counting Jews as dogs, that there's just a certain amount that we have to, that we have to remind them and in their curriculum, so that they're not raised on a curriculum of hate. And I just want to come back to the point that I made earlier, and I think I heard Rob Saflot make, is as important as the Abrahamic faiths are, and for example, the Abrahamic house as a symbolic gesture and as a real gesture for people to visit are in the UAE, just because the Abraham Accords are so great and they're historic, and we've tried to build as best we can on that progress, we shouldn't get caught up on the labels, and we should remember to treat each country individually, because if we're gonna just, for example, maybe one country wants to talk about normalizing relations or normalizing understanding of the Jewish people, because a label shouldn't be a reason why Jews shouldn't be normalized in the country, or why we can't encourage more economic growth or trade or tourism with the State of Israel and others.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And it's this sort of takes me back to my childhood growing up in Amman, Jordan, because watching the news with my dad at the time was essential, and he watched it on various channels to see what's happening. But as a child growing up, we, before satellite TV was available, we had access to Jordan TV, to Israel TV, and to Syria TV. And so I watched Sesame Street in Arabic, English, and Hebrew, and can count in 3 languages, which is, it's interesting how I still remember this, and I remember that was always something that I kicked off my conversations with when I, for the first time, also met Israelis in college. That was a challenging conversation to have in the beginning, but this is how this work is done. And as you mentioned, each country has its own particular context that has to be factored in when a lot of these initiatives are put together. Jeff, if you take us back to some of these programs, some of the initiatives that were mentioned that are led by the State Department focus on youth. And the youth factor is so important because the region comprises of youth, of course, in various parts of MENA, from Jordan to Tunisia to Egypt, and to a lesser extent in the GCC, unemployment is a huge issue. So people have other things on their mind, but how can some of these State Department programs and other programs that are organic, led by civil society, bring young people together to address basically this distrust or mistrust that had been part of the narrative for so long?
Well, I think people, when you bring them together, they find out that people are usually just people, and most people are good. One of the things we do, one of my favorite programs, is English language. Everyone wants to study English. Well, many people want to study English. And the State Department has huge numbers of English language programs all over the region, especially for disadvantaged youth. When I served in Israel, we focused most of these programs on the Israeli Arab community and also some of the ultra-Orthodox sector. We have big programs all over the Middle East. Many of them are in person, some of them are online. And then what we try to do is give kids the opportunity to learn English, to engage with American culture, thinking, views, values, and then in some cases to meet each other in additional programs. We stay in touch. Many of them come to study in the United States, and so that's a big one. We have a lot of exchange programs, and I think I mentioned before we have something like 75 Nobel laureates and over 400 former heads of state. Well, that's one thing, but we also have groups of people coming here together and studying together. I think it is fantastic. You came here and were in university. Was that an exchange program or?
No, I came for grad school and never
But
left.
it could have been. So we have a lot of grad students coming here. We've got, there are many cases of Israelis and Jordanians coming here together. They're going to grad school. They're singing Sesame Street songs, bouncing back and forth. I can just picture it now. I won't be able to get that out of my head. And these are really, really great things. So when you bring people together, we have a unique convening power. Right now in our office, we're acutely aware of disinformation in the Middle East. And so one of the things we want to do is take senior journalists from across the region here to meet with our policy leaders to talk about our policy and also to talk with each other to build those kinds of connections. And so there's no cookie cutter approach. There's no simple way to do it. But I think our job is to get out and engage as much as humanly possible on our own, and then to keep in mind that it's acutely important for us to come together. At an earlier tour, I heard people mention the Caucasus. I served in Azerbaijan, and we're doing everything we can there to bring Azerbaijanis and Armenians together, which is so hard. That's harder than this. Forget like. But look, these things, when it's amazing that when Azerbaijanis and Armenians are together, they often find they like each other, especially if they're not talking about politics. But so I really think that these human interactions are really, really important. I think there's a lot that we can do as a US government to support it, and there's a lot that happens even without it. So we've got the fact that we have so many people coming to what I believe is the best educational system in the world, right here in the United States. We can leverage that. We're pulling in people from all over the region and all over the world, and they're talking to each other, and they're discussing things, and they're building relationships, and so much comes out of that. And there's a lot more we can accomplish together.
And I know, for the lack of a better term, this is the soft power of the United States. I don't think it's soft. I think it's the essential or smart power aspect of the United States. But I can tell you that from beyond just working with youth, bringing in journalists to also experience what America's freedom of expression and freedom of the press looks like. I think, having worked in the public diplomacy sphere for also a long time, as you are right now, these conversations are essential, and the United States has a significant pull factor that even this was referenced in the earlier panel on security, even with great power competition in the Middle East. The intention is, yes, keep the MENA region heading west. And yes, there's disinformation, there's competition for narrative as well. But when you ask young people where they want to work, where they want to study, everybody turns to the West. Everybody turns particularly to the United States. So that is something that I guess, makes your job a little bit easier, hopefully.
I think it does, and I think also, even in my own organization, people make the mistake of thinking, of misinterpreting what the term soft power means, or thinking that public diplomacy and people-to-people work is just some external thing, it's exogenous, it's just reinforcing what's happening. No, it is central. It is at the very, very core of what we need to be doing to further our policies. saw that in Ukraine just now, where Russia says explicitly they're having a war attacking a culture, trying to eliminate it, and a language. And the Middle East is no stranger to huge battles over cultural narratives and history and viewpoints, so more than any place. And so our work in this sector could not be more important, could not be more existential, could not be more impactful on everything else we're doing, from security to economics to bread and butter issues that are going to have an impact on whether or not people have food on the table. So I really believe in it. And I'm glad that everyone here believes in it too and is part of this effort.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Aaron, I want to turn to you for one last question because we're running out of time. So education is crucial to instilling these values of acceptance, as you said, to ensure that you're at a minimum level not dehumanizing or not othering. How can your work support some of these initiatives to ensure that there are conversations being had between schools, but also, you mentioned the curricular reform in Saudi Arabia, how important that is in terms of references to the Jewish people. How can the education system be a sort of the entry point for some of this work?
Yeah, no, it's so important. And again, not to speak too highly of my boss, Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt, but she is also a Holocaust historian, probably one of the best communicators on that issue. And so it's central to the work that we do. A youth that's misinformed about their history or encouraged towards act of incitement, or when terrorist attacks are celebrated by handing out treats and candies, that is not an environment in which the youth can thrive. And so specifically, one of the issues we work on is Holocaust education. When I was in the UAE, I visited a sort of museum on the Holocaust. It was quite impactful to be standing in the UAE and be learning about what happened in the Holocaust and the role of their countries in it. It's quite important. Morocco does include Holocaust education in their curriculum, and we believe there's some progress to be made with the UAE, and of course we encourage them to do so. One of the important things when we engage with countries throughout the MENA region, we've been mostly talking about some positive developments. We don't have to agree on that fighting anti-Semitism is important or that Holocaust education is important. Sometimes with interlocutors, we don't always have warm conversations. But what's important for them to understand is, from the perspective of the State Department and the Biden-Harris administration, combating anti-Semitism and increasing Holocaust education is just a foreign policy policy of the United States of America. And so if for some reason you happen to be on the other side of the issue of fighting anti-Semitism, that's going to have an impact on our bilateral relationship in every sense. And so it's important that when we have these conversations, whether it's Jeff or me or our bosses, that we're speaking with the full force of the United States. And especially since we're on Capitol Hill, I just want to say one thing about soft power. So I worked for a member of Congress, Congressman Steve Rothman, who was a HAC-D appropriator and foreign ops appropriator. I presume most of you know what that is, but if you've seen Charlie Wilson's War, it's those assignments. And we would go from a meeting where we'd be discussing billions of dollars to be appropriated for, let's say, a second engine on the F-35 or a billion-dollar aircraft carrier. And then we'd be going to the next meeting where, as Secretary Blinken pointed out today, less than 1% of our budget goes towards diplomacy, foreign aid, and global engagement. And general after general would come and testify before us and say, the less you spend on diplomacy, the more we spend on bullets. And so I think it's something important for us all to understand, especially as we sit in Capitol Hill, that there's nothing more important than U.S. leadership abroad. And it's important to be fully funded for that to happen. And CRs just don't cut it.
Thank you for highlighting that, both the U.S. leadership aspect in the Middle East, but also the emphasis on the first D of the 3 Ds, right? The diplomacy aspect as well. Thank you so much to both of you for your time and for sharing what the U.S. government is doing to engage more people in the region and ensure that there is more progress, but also to ensure that there's a conducive environment for peaceful coexistence, for acceptance, for humanizing or not dehumanizing, as you said, Aaron, of all the people of the region, Israelis, Palestinians, Jordanians, Egyptians, Emiratis, Bahrainis, Moroccans, and others across MENA. Thank you very much. And now I just want to very briefly introduce recorded remarks by His Excellency, the Ambassador of Bahrain, Sheikh Abdullah Al Khalifa. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. The purpose of which you're gathered is not only significant to both our lands, but it is near and dear to my heart personally. The Abraham Accords are more than a mere agreement between states. They are foundational blocks that support the pillars of safety, security, and prosperity. Although it was very humbling to be offered the opportunity to participate alongside such esteemed statesmen as General Terry Wolff and my good friend Congressman Joe Wilson, a delegation of the highest level has come in from Bahrain requiring my presence. Although the delegation that I'm presently tending to is further advancing critical bilateral relations, which you'll be hearing about soon, the Atlantic Council is owed a specific debt of gratitude by myself, those throughout the Kingdom of Bahrain and the greater region for what they have done with the N7 initiative. In gathering the members of the Accords, plus Egypt and Jordan, this group has set a momentum so strong that it has emboldened other multilateral efforts throughout the region. In fact, the Kingdom of Bahrain was honored to have hosted the most recent meeting of the group, focusing on trade and critical economic ties, and we look forward to supporting our fellow members as upcoming gatherings address other critical needs. Realizing long ago what a foundational element regional stability is, the Kingdom of Bahrain made sure that this stability was the cornerstone of the joint War and Peace strategy signed on the sidelines of the first Negev summit by the foreign ministers of both my country and the State of Israel. This agreement is a roadmap unlike any other. Working with like-minded nations, we realize that the nature of threats posed by our common enemies are ever-changing and demand unwavering vigilance and seamless cooperation. Always willing to work with well-intended allies, we seek to find innovative ways to mitigate the effects of those evolving nefarious tactics, responding in kind, if not more so, for added deterrence. Our hosting of the International Maritime Security Construct provides a blueprint by which a dozen countries from the region and beyond have come together to assure the security throughout the waterways of the Middle East, which allows for the free and open movement of more than 2,500 merchant ships per year and over 21 million barrels of oil that leave the Arabian Gulf on a daily basis, assuring the stability of critical energy prices and markets. While the United States NAVCENT, based in Manama with 21 participating countries, has always sought to assure safe passage throughout the Arabian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, the Red Sea, and parts of the Indian Ocean, it has become further emboldened by the Abraham Accords. You see, shortly after signing the Accords, the Kingdom of Bahrain entered into a historic defense agreement with the State of Israel, the first of its kind between an Arab nation and the State of Israel. This pact has enabled the IDF to join NAVCENT, which has already resulted in multiple collaborations, joint military exercises, and exchanges at the highest level. Yes, the relationship with the United States has been as long as it is true. For over 150 years now, our two nations have stood side by side unwaveringly. Today, not only is NAVCENT based in Bahrain, but the critical task forces 151, 152, and Task Force 59, a task force unlike any other before it, using remote technology to map the ocean, are run out of the kingdom as well. Since the signing of the Abraham Accords on the South Lawn of the White House, this agreement has affected not just its subscribed nations, but many other throughout the region, initiating unprecedented security collaborations, opening the floodgates of commerce, educational exchanges, and people-to-people connections that have demonstrated the best of humanity. For it is a multi-dimensional security architecture that is well needed today. One that not only addresses the physical threats, but also identifies economic opportunities. The exact kind of architecture that agreements such as the Abraham Accords provides the building blocks to establish. We must create the means necessary for the preservation of complete long-term stability throughout the region and beyond. Doing so will require collaboration, integration, and devotion from leaders, which will allow opportunities to flourish. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, everyone. For those of you who aren't aware, the Crown Prince of Bahrain and the Foreign Minister met with Tony Blinken today to sign a new security and economic agreement, bilateral agreement. This is more of the details are slowly coming out, but it's quite an important accomplishment in bilateral relations. We're going to take a quick, 10-minute break right now before we come back. Please do come back. The next panel should be quite worth your time and very interesting. Thank you very much. Our moderator for this next panel is Shira Efron, who many of you know, a wonderful scholar and expert from a variety of different think tanks. Has done work with our N7 initiative on a number of our conferences that we've done around the world. So with no further ado, let me hand it over to Shira.
Thank you, Will. And is this okay? Is it too loud? No, it's okay. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here to share the stage with these esteemed speakers on such an important day. As we, I know you had 2 sessions previously, but I think as we celebrate today 3 years of the Abraham Accords, it's very clear that this sort of the economic cooperation is really one of the biggest success stories of the Accords. And cooperation spans across, and we will hear more about it today, but food, ag tech, cybersecurity, healthcare, I'm hearing even space, and much more. So in the next 45 minutes, we would like to unpack some of the economic and trade issues in the region, speak about the many opportunities that are still, that we still have, but also have a candid conversation about the challenges, if we can, and also to think how the U.S. can continue to play a constructive role. So before we begin the session, I need to do some housekeeping. I would like to remind our audience in person and virtually that you are welcome to ask your questions. There's this QR code. Oh, you see it? And you can scan it. You can use our Ask AC platform, or you can just go to the website askac.org, select the title of this event, and this will direct you to the same submission page for questions. And please, otherwise I will be the only one asking questions, so please ask your questions. So I'll very briefly introduce our remarkable guests, and I apologize in advance for not reading your long and rich bios. We do want to hear you and not about you. We'll start to my left. His Excellency Youssef Al-Otaiba has served as Ambassador of the United Arab Emirates to the United States since 2008, so quite a few number of years already, and really one of the chief architects of the Abraham Accords. Moving on to next, we have Deputy Assistant Secretary for Assistance, Coordination, and Regional and Multilateral Affairs with the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs with the U.S. State Department. It's a mouthful. Chris has been...
I think they say a longer title
is a more important position.
Yes, yes, yes.
I was
of
about to
course.
argue the opposite today.
Trying to help you out.
Before joining the State Department, you've worked at the Vice President's office, doing a lot of important things. And last but definitely not least, the Honorable Don Bacon, House Representative and member of the House Abraham Accords Caucus, U.S. Congress, veteran of the U.S. Air Force, has served for many, many years, including in the region. Thank you for your service. But the region is not foreign to you. I know you need to leave a little bit early, so when they call you,
I have another
we will let you
ambassador
go.
visiting me in my office, so that's what's going on.
Okay, I will like to start with you, Ambassador Olataiba, and really maybe if you can give us sort of the big picture. So how do you think has the economic landscape in the region has evolved since the signing of the accords? If you can share sort of what you were most surprised about. And I know you speak really fast, so if you can also tell us, looking ahead, what kind of initiatives are being explored, and what do you see as the main challenges and opportunities?
Thank you, Shira. Thank you to everybody at the Atlantic Council. Will, thank you for having us. If I can just start off by sending our thoughts and prayers and condolences to the people of Morocco, the people of Libya, for all the suffering that they're going through. And we hope we get through these tragic scenarios as quickly and as painlessly as possible. And moving on to your question, everything I say today, please keep in mind that as we hit this 3-year mark of the Abraham Accords, we're starting from zero. We were starting with a relationship that had no trade, that had no flights, that had no business, that had no connectivity. And so within 3 years, the numbers, the indicators, the levels that we have reached are from zero, are from a standing start. And while they are impressive, I think trade, investments, flights, we are now just starting to pick up. I think we built a foundation for the last 3 years. We've signed MOUs. We've created things that didn't exist, like civil aviation agreements, like agreements between central banks. Basically, in the first 3 years, we've signed 120 MOUs between the UAE and Israel, including a free trade agreement, including an agreement on double taxation, including visa waiver programs. We've had 1 million Israelis visit the UAE so far. And let me ask you a question, because I was surprised by the number. I had my team double fact check this twice. How many flights do we think exist between UAE and Israel today? Weekly flights.
Anyone care to guess? Well, I guess UAE, Abu Dhabi, maybe it's, how many? Probably like, there are more than 2 a day, right?
152 flights per week.
Wow.
Exactly.
I would have been wrong.
That was,
I would have been wrong.
so again, from 0 flights 3 years ago to 152 flights, to a lot of tourism, to a lot of trade, to a lot of things that didn't exist before, to breaking taboos. When business finds their counterparts, usually the government doesn't need to intervene. Usually we don't need to put businesses together. They're very good at finding each other and finding opportunities. What I think we can do is provide the frameworks, provide the regulation, provide the infrastructure, provide the opportunities to convene and bring them together. And then deals are done automatically. So in the first 3 years of this, I am not surprised by how many business deals have taken place. I am not surprised by that we reached $3 billion worth of bilateral trade, and we're expecting it to go up to $10 billion. I am more surprised by how quickly the two countries and societies have accepted each other culturally. I am surprised by the lack of animosity in that people are having Jewish Orthodox wedding in Dubai, and people are being welcomed in both places. So, for a long time, there wasn't that openness. There wasn't that acceptance. And you can't measure it in trade or business deals, but you can see when people visit UAE from Israel how comfortable they are and how comfortable the people in the UAE are with having them.
That's great. Thank you. Moving on to, just because we have you for a little bit less time than the others, how has the U.S. government strategically supported and encouraged economic integration between Israel and Arab countries following the Abraham Accords? What is Congress' role going forward?
Well, thank you. I want to just thank the ambassador. I'm an Air Force guy for 30 years. I operated out of El Dhafra, which is an air base near Abu Dhabi.
My unit flew out of Bateen, which is also in Abu Dhabi. I really love Abu Dhabi. I've been to Dubai as well, but a lot more time in Abu Dhabi and a lot of good memories there. But the alliance between our countries is very important. Obviously the U.S. government, I think under the previous administration, I'm an equal opportunity critic. I've criticized them in a lot of areas. Also been a critic of the current administration. But one area where we agree, the Abraham Accords are very important. It's a win-win for the countries involved. It's a win-win for America. It's a win-win for security, a win-win for economic growth. And really the UAE and I think Bahrain were in prime position to really want to move in and take advantage of this accord, as well as Israel. If I may, I think there was two things that happened that made this possible. For many decades, we all thought we had to wait for an Israeli-Palestinian agreement, but you got to have two people who are willing to negotiate and get to the table and agree. And I think we said, well, we could still put pressure and do that, but why are we waiting to do all this other stuff? We could make ties here and make life better for all of our citizens and not just have to wait. And I think that was a game-changing mindset change. Two, I think people realized that Iran was a threat to all of that region. And it was time to start pulling together and working together for mutual benefit. And I think that those two things that served as the impetus to do what happened there. And I take great pride that our government helped facilitate this great agreement that I think has made the Middle East more secure. When it comes to the military, when it comes to the economic integration, I think we have an opportunity to encourage, to want to also be a part of the trade benefits, not just between the multilateral countries involved, but with the U.S. as well. If we can also offer our trade at a discount and facilitate their trade, that's a good thing. Now we have an opportunity to help encourage a round two. And I think it's become harder to get that, but it's not impossible. It may not be overnight, but I think with some of the current trends we're seeing in the Middle East right now and some of the things with U.S. and Iran, I think it's a little more challenging to get to round two, but we should not give up on it. And I think our role in the Congress is to help encourage that round two, to get countries 5 and 6 involved or whatever it may be. Finally, I just wanted to say a congressional role is we passed legislation to encourage maritime mutual support for tracking all the ships in the region. That's something that Congress has pushed. In this current NDA, we've pushed a multilateral air defense surveillance and tracking so that countries can work together to track air defense and potential threats. So these are just some of the areas that Congress has weighed in and will weigh in.
Thank you, and we'll get to this other looming, the potential in a little bit. Daz Bachmeier, can you share some of the projects you're working on in the State Department to support the Accords? Sort of what are the main initiatives that you're doing within the administration, within the State Department?
Yes, happy to. So I'm happy to say there's a plethora of different arrangements that have come out of the Abraham Accords. And as you know, the administration has been strongly supportive of the Abraham Accords and wants to build on them to try to build up this economic integration that the ambassador noted is so absent. One of the facts that always struck me that we've seen is the World Bank has said that trade between the countries in the region is 3 times more expensive and 4 times slower than other high-income countries. And so if you look at our longstanding interest in stability in the region and our longstanding interest in prosperity, these things really go hand in hand. And so we've tried to find more avenues to build on those things. So you can see the Negev Forum, which is our effort to build on the Abraham Accords and create sort of a political overlay to expand on those accords. It has a series of working groups that I think get at the real heart of the matter, which is building on actual projects that the countries can work on together, getting their technocrats together to work on different things. So whether that's clean energy, food security, health, regional security, education, these are all things that these countries have not always worked together on and can, and we're there to try to help facilitate that in any way we can. We have the I2U2, which the ambassador knows well, the India, UAE, United States, and Israel, and we've been working hard to develop projects in that context as well. And then you've got Project Prosperity, another one that is not with all of the members, but between the UAE, Israel, and Jordan, in an effort to address the climate challenges between those two. So we've got a lot going on, and we're very excited to continue to chip away at this and make more progress.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Ambassador, I'd like to get back to you. You know, the region is going through a transformation, a lot thanks to the normalization efforts, I think. And The Economist, I don't know if any of you read The Economist, but it acknowledged this transformation last week on the cover image. But it seems that while some countries succeed, others fall behind. The gaps between the haves and the have-nots are just becoming bigger. And I'll just throw in some statistics. The Gulf and Israel account for only 14% of the population, but 60% of GDP, 73% of goods exports, and 75% of inward multinational investment. And of course, around these countries, we have all the countries teetering on the brink. And you know, you mentioned Libya, Lebanon, you know, some different levels of development. And my question is, how can normalization advance a better future that benefits not only Israel and the Gulf, but you know, trickles around to make the region better?
It's a great question. And you know, the region for a long time has been criticized for being not integrated, not being developed, not really forward-looking enough. And for a long time, that criticism was valid. But I think what we're seeing today, especially in the last 3-4 years, and not just the Abraham Accords, it's integration of infrastructure development projects that we're seeing between Iraq and Egypt and Jordan, between so many other players that are kind of moving it forward that have nothing to do with the Abraham Accords. I think there is a focus on trying to improve the lifestyle, the quality of life, the infrastructure, the economic development of the region. Now, the best way for the Abraham Accords to benefit those countries are through the things that Chris talked about, through I2U2, through Negev Forum, through Project Prosperity, which that probably could not have happened without the Abraham Accords. We just saw last week President Biden, Prime Minister Modi, Sheikh Mohammed, and Prince Mohammed bin Salman sign the infrastructure project that is going to connect and integrate the Gulf, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, eventually Iraq and Turkey, all the way over to India. Again, that's something that is, to me, that's a once-in-a-generation type of project, and it's going to take a long time, but that will definitely have an impact on countries even that are not directly involved. That will create jobs. That will create technology transfer. That will create opportunities that did not exist. So I think it's going to take us some time for these types of projects to actually gain momentum. But to me, that's the next phase of where the Abraham Accords needs to go. The regional type of integration that we were just talking about. You know, Will, I've pitched this many, many times. I don't know why we are not advocating for an Abrahamic free trade zone between the Abrahamic countries. That's the type of project that we'd like to see in the future that will benefit anyone who signs up. So I think we need to keep our eye on the ball and keep looking forward, but also the countries that are struggling need to find ways to improve their sort of systems and their qualities and be able to benefit from the things that we are doing.
Thank you. This is great. And you know, in my previous affiliation, I was at the RAND Corporation. We did a modeling of this free trade Abrahamic environment, and really, it's going to benefit the region tremendously. Thank you for that. Congressman Bacon, I wanted to ask you, because we're in Washington speaking about the Middle East, but we know that in Washington you cannot have a conversation that is not about China. So I do want to ask you, to what extent do you think that normalization, the one that we've seen and maybe the future one, can help support U.S. broader foreign policy, the great power competition, mainly vis-a-vis China, but also Russia?
Well, I echo our leader here from the State Department. You know, it's in our national interest to have increased stability, prosperity, economic ties in the Middle East. And the Abraham Accords are phenomenal. And I agree with the ambassador, too, that a free trade zone, that would be a great step forward. America should help facilitate that, help, you know, make that possible. But when America's not involved, there's clearly voids there. We see in Syria, Russia has moved into that void. And when there was this distance between us and Saudi Arabia, China moved right in and tried to facilitate negotiations between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So when we're not being leaders, other people are going to fill that void, and I'm just going to be blunt. They don't share our values. They want to undercut our economic interests as well. But in the end, our views is we want to support countries that are striving towards values we believe in, whether it's democracy, whether it's human rights, and I don't think China is much more focused on their economic growth versus broader and more, I'd say, more important values that we want to see in the world and see those values grow. Long story short, America has to be engaged, because if we're not, there's a void. I see an increasing isolationism in our own country. It doesn't make a better world. It's a world that becomes more dangerous, more threatening. And we thought that was going to work in 1937 and 1938. It does not work. And so one of the strengths we have as a country is we try not to come in with economic, like what we want to gain from it. We're trying to do things that are good for the region. Peace, economic growth, and stability. That's also good for us. I think we have higher goals that we want to achieve there. And I think that's why other countries allow us to work with them and try to make these things possible. Now, I forgot two things that we did do that was from Congress. We helped support a $3 billion program to help with all the things that we're trying to do within the Abraham Accords. That was a congressional initiative to help fund that $3 billion. Plus, we asked for a representative from the State Department to do this full time, serving in the Abraham Accords. So we have, the previous ambassador to Israel serving there. So just a couple more initiatives that Congress helped push and support.
Yeah, thank you. You also signed a letter last June urging the administration to integrate the success of the Accords into the U.S. broader Africa strategy. I don't know if you want to say a word about that.
But we know if the model here would work also in Africa, there'd be many countries in Africa, if they formed a similar type of relationships, that would benefit. And we'd love to help facilitate that. And I'm thinking countries like Kenya, for example, but there's a whole array of countries. So this is a great blueprint, not just for Arab-Israeli relationships, but for also in Africa. So, and I think we've just there's so much more we can accomplish in Abraham Accords. As I already mentioned, I think the biggest gains are economic. I'm more of a military guy, but I surely see the economic value of the 150 flights. That's incredible, right? And that's both sides prosper and they win from that. But I also clearly see the military side. This is a dangerous part of the world. Iran is a threat. The terrorism they promote in the region, we can't ignore. And I think all of us, if we could form better relationships on air defenses and maritime security, those are also potential big wins out of this in the future.
If I can just add, also the two forums that we were talking about, the Negev Forum and I2U2, if you look down at the breakdown of the working groups, they are all non-political issues. They are all economic, infrastructure, climate, space, healthcare. These are all things about how do we build a better future. So if countries, like-minded countries, can get together and figure out ways to collaborate multilaterally on how do you build a better infrastructure system, or how do we build a better healthcare system, or how do we have a better climate program for the region, I think that's what our societies look for, right? How is tomorrow going to be better than today? And I think the way we are coming up with them is in ways that are less about politics, less about issues that divide us, and more about how do we bring ourselves and countries and societies together.
Thank you for that. I do want to ask, you raised it has a name now, right? Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, PGI, this newly really ambitious initiative that President Biden mentioned, launched with Modi, the rail and shipping project linking India and the Middle East. And how critical is normalization for that project to succeed, in your view? Yeah, sorry.
I think it is. The ambassador said with respect to I2U2 couldn't have happened without this sort of progress in the normalization front in the Abraham Accords. I mean, this is one huge step in the direction towards better integrating the region, not just amongst itself, but with Europe and with India. And it's a really ambitious project that the president announced at the G20 and took an incredible amount of effort from the various governments. So I think it's going to be really game-changing. As the ambassador said, it's going to take a long time, obviously, to do these big sort of economic infrastructure projects. Economic forces take a long time to change. But, getting it started, and as we continue to do the work to build up the political side of this in support of it as well, will make it all that much easier.
Thank you. We are marking 3 years to the Abraham Accords, but we're also marking 30 years to the signing of the Oslo Accords. To what extent, and I know you mentioned this, Congressman, about the Palestinians not holding a veto sort of on the process before, but the question is still, can we see a way in which normalization can contribute to the Palestinian economy? Can it create jobs also for Palestinians? Can it be leveraged also maybe for a political solution at one point? So, I'd appreciate any one of you taking this question, or all of you. Ambassador, why don't we start with you?
I think the opportunity is there. I think the opportunity for this to benefit many, many more other communities and societies exists. It requires leadership. It requires vision. We can't just sit here and do it from a panel in Congress, as I wish we could, but it requires buy-in from all places. And what the Abraham Accords did was just buy more space for diplomacy and for a two-state solution. We cannot solve that. That has to come from the players in the region themselves. So as much as I would like to come up with the brilliant idea that's going to fix everything, I don't think I can.
Yeah, there are a lot of people in this city that have tried, so don't feel bad. Please, go ahead.
Very well said. I think from the administration's perspective, as strong supporters of the Abraham Accords, we also want to make sure that the Palestinians don't get forgotten in all of this, and that they are able to, over time, derive benefits from this process. It, again, is a very complicated problem, and one that is going to require continued work both inside and outside of this framework. But we're very hopeful that we can find a way that Palestinians can benefit from this, and especially as we continue to expand our various groupings.
Thank you. Congressman.
We clearly want peace in Israel and Palestine, between the two peoples. We got to have two sides that want to have peace too, and I just don't sense that one side is fully ready for that. But regardless, we should always encourage it. And I think when you have economic growth and economic investment, that gives people hope. So I hope when there's investment in the Palestinian areas, that's good for the people, and hopefully that encourages the mindset that two people can exist together in a peaceful way. My main concern from my vantage point is that the money we invest doesn't go towards terrorism, and that's always been a concern. Often it's not, but sometimes we've seen it is, and I have a hard time having U.S. taxpayer money go where it's helping fund terrorism. But clearly, we want folks to have good jobs, and good jobs provides the promise of a better life, and a better life means I need to get along with my neighbor better, and we hope that that's the path forward.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Moving on, and again, we'll start maybe this way. The Middle East, there's a region full of geopolitical problems, but it's also, unfortunately, one of the most vulnerable regions to climate change. The region warms up at twice the average rate. It's already the driest region in the world, susceptible to sea level rise, dust storms. I just heard the statistics. There are going to be 300 dust days in Iraq, and it's pretty close to you, in 2050. So 300 dust days in Iraq every year. It doesn't leave many non-dust days. And we also know, the transboundary effects of climate change and the threat multiplier effects. Your country is hosting COP28. How do you think normalization can turn the region to be a little bit more climate resilient for countries like Libya to be able to adapt so when the flood comes, and especially in areas of food security and water security?
So a lot of that research is already taking place as we speak. And again, that's stuff that is taking place now that could not have taken place 3 years ago. So we have scientists and academies and universities working together. So those were actually some of the first MOUs that got signed. Yeah, I remember seeing something between Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed AI University and a counterpart in Israel. That was one of the first things that was signed in the first month on research in climate and in food security. So there's nothing that prevents an Emirati researcher or scientist working with an Israeli researcher or scientist to come up with some breakthrough, with some app, with some technology that will help make some of the issues you described a little bit easier. You're right. Our area in the world might be one of the worst, most vulnerable areas to climate. We have no rivers, we have no ponds, we have no lakes, and we have very little rainfall. And so we don't have a choice. We have to find a solution. We have to look at clean energy. We have to look at wind power and solar power. And if that can be assisted by doing that research with a country that already has significant advances in those fields, why not?
Thank you. And what is the administration doing to advance some, partnerships in those fields?
So, as the ambassador said this, I have a great example that came to mind of a recent trip I took to Jerusalem to be part of the U.S.-Israel Strategic Technology Dialogue. And as part of that, they took us on a series of site visits to meet with clean energy companies and startups. And in every case, they would brief on what they're doing in clean energy. And every company every single one said, it would come up somewhere in the conversation how next week they're going to the UAE or they're going to Morocco or their business plan. And I wasn't asking about the Abraham Accords. It wasn't the subject of the conversation. But this just came up every single time. And so you see these, as the ambassador noted, these cultural and business ties starting to develop. And you can see without even us urging that question.
Yeah, this stuff doesn't make the headlines anymore just because it's become normal, but it's happening on a daily basis.
And those are really shared challenges. I'll just remind you, your former boss, so Vice President Harris, when Israeli President Herzog was here in July, they signed a bilateral cooperation to putting investment of together of $70 million to enhance water and food security across the Middle East and Africa. And there's really no reason why the UAE would not be part of these efforts also. So.
On that, as a matter of fact, I was going to mention as well, that's been a really another important step that we've taken. And, we hope to be able to use that to further the objectives of the Negev Forum, of other bodies. And this is just a great example of where, from my hat of using foreign assistance, and something that we can do is where we in Israel can work to help other countries in the region. That helps burnish their own image and helps demonstrate their own commitment to the region. I think it's something that's really important to do. The UAE is another close partner in all of this. We have all sorts of projects where we're working with Masdar or the UAE government on climate-related projects, and it's just it's really inspiring when you step back and take a look at it.
Thank you, and I'd love to hear your view on this also in Congress.
I'm going to have to depart here pretty quick. I have the South Korean ambassador waiting for me in the office, but I just could imagine the synergy between UAE and Israel on whether it's water, trying to turn the desert into fertile ground, increasing drinking water. I'm not as familiar with all the science and technology in UAE. I've been in Dubai. It's pretty impressive. It blows you away when you walk around Dubai, right? And I love my time in Abu Dhabi. Israel right now in Tel Aviv, it's known as the Silicon Valley too, the second Silicon Valley. They have so much growth in technology. In Omaha, Nebraska, where I'm from, we're world's leaders in pivot irrigation. But you go to Israel, they are all about drip irrigation. They've been able to master how to turn desert into fertile ground. And one of the win-wins here is having this partnership between UAE and Israel who can share their technology and investments, invest in each other, and both peoples come out ahead on that. And one of it's turning desert into fields. What Israel's also been able to do with getting water out of the Mediterranean, I think, can also be a win-win. And we were just talking about India, their collaboration between all those countries and UAE and Israel with that as well. There is so much potential here that's for the good of all the people.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being with us. Congressman Bacon, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have two, there are some audience questions, but I'd like to ask before that. It also came up from the audience. We are hearing a lot about a future normalization potential between Israel and Saudi Arabia. So I guess two questions. It's the same question, but two versions for both of you. One is how do you think it will affect the region? How will it affect the economic landscape in the region, the connectivity, the integration, all those good things? Maybe if you want to share some personal lessons, what advice do you have for your neighbors? And what do you think, I guess, from a U.S. perspective? I want to ask you to guess if it's going to happen really by the end of the year, but what is the U.S. doing to advance it? So maybe we'll start with the ambassador.
I have lots of advice, but I'll share it with my Saudi friends in private, not in public. I think anything, whether it's Saudi or anyone else, that integrates and helps the region link up and tie each other up and create jobs and create prosperity and increase stability, everybody's going to sign up for it. Everybody. Inside the region or outside the region. But these are decisions that are ultimately need to be made by the countries involved. And given the experience of what we went through and how we negotiated and how the Abraham Accords were created, I'm happy to share a lot of that, and I have shared much of that in the past, but I'll do that in private.
Well, I certainly don't have any news to break here. Obviously, the administration supports expanding the Abraham Accords within the region and beyond. You look at the announcement by the president at the G20, and that certainly is indicative of the effort that's going in to try to find other ways to expand this. So, the more that the region can integrate economically, certainly that has to support political integration, and I think vice versa. As political integration expands, so too does economic prosperity.
Okay, so we only have a few minutes, so I can start on the more difficult questions here. There's a question for you specifically. I didn't write it, I swear. So when the UAE signed the deal, it was declared that part of it was in exchange for freezing annexation. And you had posited a very clear a choice for the Israelis, annexation or normalization. What is the UAE's perspective with this government, what this government is doing that some people would say is de facto annexation?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because it is happening, and I think it's happening in a way that is not visible, and it's going to make coming back to the two-state solution even more challenging. And so, but our deal was based on a certain time period, and that time period is almost done. And so we have no ability to leverage decisions that are made outside of the period that was what the Abraham Accords was based on. So I think it's up to now future countries if they want to take that particular approach. But there's very little that the UAE can do at this moment to shape what happens inside Israel.
I mean, said as someone who lives now in Israel, maybe you were surprised by the amount of leverage that you did have. And it was a momentary choice for Israelis at the time, and I think it will continue to be.
It was, and there was tremendous enthusiasm in the United States for getting this done. This is why this happened. An idea was brought, it solved the problem, everybody benefited from this solution, and so there was a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and support inside the U.S. to getting this to a solution.
So it's not fair. You're the only one on the hot seat. So that's let's get to the U.S. enthusiasm about getting this done. Israel has, should I say, an interesting government now. How does Israel's internal politics now affect the ability of the administration to do something that it seems very keen on doing?
That's a good question. I mean, I think we obviously have a lot of discussions with our Israeli partners about everything from domestic politics to international issues, and we continue to have, a vibrant diplomatic exchange on all sorts of issues, and that sort of continues, I think, regardless of the rest of the environment. From the normalization or from the integration and normalization perspective, I think we continue to see this as vehicles for advancing our goals within the region, for advancing economic prosperity and thereby advancing stability in the region, something that we have long supported. And so this is certainly in our interest. Obviously, there are always going to be discussions amongst governments where you might have some things you agree on and some things you don't, but this is one where we certainly continue to agree on the importance of expanding normalization.
Thank you. There's another question for you. In terms of economic cooperation, the United States has supported the qualified industrial zones between Israel and Jordan and Egypt upon making peace. And there's an argument here that these have been significant. Would you support the same model among the U.S., Israel, and the Abraham Accord countries?
It's certainly a really interesting idea. I won't pretend to be an expert on those specific zones, but certainly it is consistent with what we're trying to do, which is make it easier to trade between countries, make it easier to invest within countries and travel within countries. And so from that perspective, I think there's a lot of things that will come out of both the Negev Forum or I2U2 or any of these other groupings that will be, consistent with those goals.
Ambassador, what do you think about this idea?
Yeah, so the idea came up before. It's been explored. I think everybody was supportive. It never really materialized, but it's one of those ideas that I don't see a constituency against it. Anyone who supports more jobs, more prosperity, more trade, more integration would go for this. I think the next level up is to actually have an Abrahamic free trade zone that allows that includes qualified economic zones, that includes joint projects between countries like the Prosperity Project between Jordan and Israel. So I think these are all good ideas. We need some momentum and some pushing to make them actually happen.
Right, and maybe the lessons learned from the quizzes before, it's when we are not going to have low-skilled workers, but actually bring the forefront of technology, right? Alternative proteins. Quiz that is about that, so where the interests of all countries in the region lie, but also what the U.S. is trying to achieve here. I think we ran out of time. I don't know if you have any final words, but I want to thank you for being here. Thank you all for having me here. And I think I'm supposed to call someone, right? Ed Hussein to moderate the next panel. And Ambassador Shapiro is stuck in Israel, so he will join us via Zoom. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin with our final panel. The focus is what's next or what comes next, and judging by the enthusiasm and the momentum in the last session, there's a lot to discuss. Our panel includes from Jerusalem Ambassador Dan Shapiro, who's a special envoy at the U.S. State Department for Regional Integration. We're hugely honored that you would make time all the way from the Holy Land, so we're grateful to you, Ambassador Shapiro. And then we have on my far left Congressman Brad Schneider, who is the co-chair of the House Abraham Accords Caucus.
More in the middle, but far left's okay.
On my far left puts me on. Anyway, so, and then last but not least, most importantly, here making time during a very difficult time is Ambassador Mike Herzog for the State of Israel, here to Washington, D.C. Now, I want to seek the Congressman's permission, if I may, to start with Ambassador Shapiro for reasons to do with A, jet lag, B, he's from the Holy Land, and C, he's in your house. So if you wouldn't mind
Absolutely, please.
Okay.
Dan, good to see you, and we should start there.
And I'll ask the same question to all three of you in the same order, that, in your minds, as you look at the Middle East, what comes next after the Abrahamic Accords in the next 2 years, 4 years, 6 years? So over to Ambassador Shapiro.
Thanks, Ed. I hope you can hear me okay. And it's great to be sharing the dais virtually with Ambassador Herzog and Congressman Schneider, two great friends and partners in this effort. And I also want to thank the team at the N7, at the Atlantic Council, and the other members of Congress and ambassadors who have participated today. I'm delighted to be here in Jerusalem and really appreciate the appreciate the opportunity. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend in person, but I really do want to share some thoughts as we celebrate these historic agreements and all the progress that's been made over the past 3 years, and look ahead, Ed, to your question about the opportunities that still lie ahead of us. I'd hope to be with you, but two canceled flights led me to still be here in Jerusalem carrying out these new duties as a senior advisor in NEA for regional integration at the Department of State. And we are focused on advancing the Abraham Accords, building on them, and deepening integration efforts more broadly across the region and beyond. Now, it's been a long-standing priority of multiple administrations, Democrat and Republican, to build a more integrated, cooperative Middle East and North Africa region, of which Israel is an integral part and a fully participating member. And the United States has really prioritized integration because the benefits are so profound. Integration creates opportunities in trade, in economic development, in diversification. It encourages security cooperation and other efforts to confront shared challenges like climate change and water resource management. And of course, as we know and we've been hearing through the other panels, it brings people together to share their experiences, their stories, and their faiths. And it's also the case that we know that for too long, the Middle East and North Africa has really been among the least integrated regions in the world. But thanks to the agreements we're marking and celebrating today, the Abraham Accords signed by the United States, Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Israel, and Bahrain, and of course the agreement with Morocco soon thereafter, along with the earlier peace agreements Israel signed with Egypt and Jordan, we really have something to build with to build a really different future for this region. So what are we doing? We're developing and building on new structures like the Negev Forum to encourage cooperation on shared challenges and opportunities. Now, the Negev Forum, you may say started from sort of modest beginnings. It was a simple meeting and a groundbreaking one, no doubt, but a simple meeting of 6 foreign ministers in March of 2022. Essentially a one-time event. But we really believe that with dedication and persistence, that summit has the potential to grow into this evolving forum which is a pillar of stability and progress in the region. So in the near term, we're focused on advancing the projects and proposals through each of the Negev Forum's 6 working groups to announce at the upcoming ministerial. We don't have an announcement on that yet, but when the next time the ministers gather, we expect they will be able to highlight projects in energy, in water and food security, in tourism and health, in education and in security that these working groups have generated. And where those projects are going to really benefit the peoples of the region. That's the goal, is to bring the benefits of normalization to their citizens so that those citizens will be more invested in this new integrated region, and other countries will consider joining to share in those benefits. Now, in the longer term, we have ambitions to draw upon other highly successful examples of regional integration. One of my favorites, I think in many ways the gold standard, is ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. That also started with somewhat modest beginnings, a meeting of foreign ministers of 5 countries in 1967. But through the years and through many, many additional meetings at many layers of government, and ultimately expanding to the private sectors and the universities and the civil societies of those countries, very diverse countries, 5 additional countries joining the original 5, that organization has evolved into an extraordinary multifaceted web of ties among its members that render that region highly integrated and in a way that benefits all of the citizens of all of the countries, and in a way that makes a return to conflictual relations, which there were some, really almost unimaginable. Now, there's some other structures that give us opportunities along these lines. The I2U2 of India, Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and the United States complements those efforts by extending cooperation beyond the region to a country that is external to the region, and that is India. We believe there are other opportunities for similar partnerships to be developed with countries outside the region, tapping into this network of the integrated Middle East and North Africa countries. And that way we can spread the benefits of the changing dynamics in the Middle East and North Africa to new partners as well. Last weekend, the potential was on full display at the G20. Where President Biden signed an MOU with the leaders of India, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, the EU, and other U.S. partners. And obviously, it very much speaks to opportunities for Israel, for Jordan, and others that will develop a transportation corridor linking the Middle East to Europe and India. This India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor is going to facilitate the development of clean energy and connect countries through undersea cables and energy grids and stimulate sustainable and inclusive economic development across 2 continents. The United States is also working closely with Israel to identify opportunities to strengthen Israel's bilateral relationships with other countries with which it does not have currently diplomatic relations. That is true of countries in the Middle East, it's true of countries in Africa, it is true of countries in Asia. These discussions take time. Many of them have to take place very discreetly, but we feel we are making steady progress and will continue to pursue those opportunities as well. And the commitment to regional integration and continuing to build on Israel's normalized ties with new partners and with new countries that have not yet done so. This is an unwavering commitment of the Biden administration. And you've heard that from several of my administration colleagues today. But we also know that this is not something that we, as the U.S. government or really governments at all, can do alone. Think tanks, the private sector, schools, hospitals, civic organizations, religious institutions, other institutions, and of course, everyday citizens are really going to play, in some ways, the most important role over time to build momentum and seize the opportunities that are now presented by what the Abraham Accords have introduced. This real integration, as we know, takes place not between governments, but between peoples. And as we lower barriers to cooperation and we create new opportunities for cooperation, we really hope what we're going to do is empower the people of the region to dream up their own possibilities of ways to deepen what has been started by the Abraham Accords. So I want to thank, again, Ed, you and the N7 team for this opportunity. I'm delighted to participate together with Ambassador Herzog and Congressman Schneider. And I'll pause here and look forward to questions following their remarks.
Thank you very much, Dan, for your participation from Jerusalem.
So first, thank you very much to the Atlantic Council and N7 for inviting me. I also want to start by expressing our deep sympathy and condolences to the Moroccan people for the catastrophe that occurred there, and we stand ready to help them in any way possible. So your question, before I talk about the future, I want to talk a little bit about what we've achieved in 3 years. We are now marking the 3rd anniversary. I think this is, we always say it's historic, and it's true. It's I think, breathtaking what we've achieved over the last 3 years. If you look at the development of our relations with any of the countries, our new peace partners, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, it's quite amazing. In so many areas, we have dozens of signed agreements. We have a free trade agreement with the UAE. We are negotiating one with Bahrain. We have a variety of government to government and private sector to private sector agreements covering a whole range of issues. We have flourishing tourism, more from Israel to the other countries. I would hope more so coming to us. But there is a new atmosphere here of peace and normalization and openness. And I think beyond the bilateral relations that we've built, also the multilateral fora that Dan referred to are extremely important, and I'd like to see more of them. We have a trilateral working group with the US and the UAE on clean energy. We have the I2U2, which I'll talk about in a moment. We have the Negev Forum with 6 working groups, and we are working to operationalize them. We are working quietly to enhance stability in the region under the umbrella of CENTCOM. We have quite a few multilateral fora which are also extremely important. And I think strategically, when you look at what we've achieved, first of all, I think this plays a role in enhancing stability in such a volatile region as ours. We basically, if you look at the big picture in the Middle East, it's a struggle between those forces who want to take us back and thrive on hatred, on violence, on strife. First and foremost, Iran and its proxies, and those of us who are focused on the well-being, the future of the region, and on stability in the region. And this new type of integration and normalization definitely helps the stability and the well-being of the region. We are cooperating and can cooperate in so many areas that know no borders, like climate change, like food, water, and energy security, like fighting the next pandemic. None of us can go it alone, even if we're very strong. Israel is relatively strong in quite a few of these areas. We need to cooperate, and we are cooperating. We can provide solutions to the region. As was mentioned by Dan, this is a new model of a warm peace between peoples, not only a cold peace between governments as we have had. This is important. And I think it also sends a message of the long-term commitment of the United States to this region, because the US is part of all of our working groups and very much involved in everything that we do to enhance normalization, integration, cooperation. The project that was announced last Saturday in the G20 is really breathtaking. If you think about it, we are going to connect Europe and Asia through the Gulf, Jordan, Israel, via trains in many other ways, and then via sea from Israel to Europe and from the Gulf to India. This is something that we could only imagine just a few years ago. It's a huge project. It is called an economic corridor, it is a transportation corridor, clean energy corridor, and communication corridor. This is something huge. And this is the type of things that we'd like to do to improve the well-being of the Middle East and beyond. Now, looking ahead, I think first thing I would like to see is the deepening of what we have already achieved. I would like to see more people-to-people programs, more youth programs connecting the young generation in our region, more educational programs, more economic programs like the free trade zones my dear friend Yusuf just spoke about in the last panel. We would like to expand normalization and integration to additional partners. Everybody talks nowadays about Saudi Arabia. I think it's a very important element. If we can get Saudi Arabia to join that trend, it will be groundbreaking and no less historic than the Abraham Accords. I think if Saudi Arabia joins, it will open the door for other Muslim countries to join as well and enhance the whole strategic trend that I was talking about. And I would like to see, I think it's not only a matter of governments, but also private sector, think tanks, Congress can play, is already playing a role, but can play an important role as well in this. So this is big, and we're strongly invested in it and pray for its success. And I want to take the opportunity to thank our colleagues in the US government for doing this with us shoulder to shoulder. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and it's a privilege to be here. It's truly a privilege to be on the same panel with Ambassador Herzog and Ambassador Shapiro. It's somewhat intimidating as well. To the question, what does the future look like? I'll share a story, and then I'll tell you that I saw the future this morning, not in an apparition, but actually got to experience it. The story is a conversation I had last night with somebody who was sharing how they had led an enterprise, not a government or not anything like this, but they had led a transformative transformation of this organization over 5 years, passed it to their successor, who led it for 10 years. And it's now at risk from things happening in that organization. And we talked, it was an educational institution, and we talked about how over the course of 15 years, that's a whole generation. But even after a whole generation, change and transformation is not sustainable if it doesn't get down to the very fabric to the youth, to the people who are coming behind. So nothing is permanent without that connection. And I was thinking of that. I was listening to the two ambassadors speak, considering the question. And I'll reflect on my experience this morning. If you were here, I talked about it earlier. I met with some young people from the Abraham Accord countries, from Israel, from UAE. The gentleman from Morocco had to go home, and again, I joined extending my condolences to the kingdom and the people of Morocco. I saw people in their, I don't know how old they were, but let's just say 20s to 30s, young people talking about the Abraham Accords, coming together and expressing it with an optimism that I hadn't seen from the region for a very long time. And this is, you ask, what does it look like? This room of young people I was with this morning is exactly what it looks like. People who are talking to each other with respect, but also with hope, who believe that there are opportunities. Now, these people focus mostly on tourism and culture and education, but on enterprise, as Ambassador Herzog mentioned, things that don't know borders, on climate change, the challenges we face as a globe. If we can work to expand, to broaden and deepen and strengthen the Abraham Accords, to make sure that a generation from now, it doesn't matter who the leaders are, that it is a part of the fabric of society, then the Abraham Accords are going to be sustainable for the long term, transformative for the long term. And I think Dan and Michael hit on those precisely. So I think then falls on us. The fact that we have the Negev Forum, that the countries are working together, they're working at the ministerial level, they're working at the sub-ministerial level. We've got to make sure it's working at the people-to-people level, the cultural exchanges, the students studying, students from Israel studying in Arab countries, students from the Arab countries studying in Israel. I would add into that students from America studying with the Israeli and Arab students together and thinking about what the future can be, because they're the ones who are really at the end going to make the future. That has to be a key part of it. But also reflecting on the conversation we had this morning, this is great, but this morning was really energizing to talk to these young people. If I think back to 1979 with the peace agreement with Egypt, to 1994 the peace agreement with Jordan, it was don't go too fast. And I think what we see now is you can't go fast enough. And the integration, the implementation, and the opportunities to build on and expand the Abraham Accords become critically important as well. And that's why even the fact that we're having the conversation of opportunities for Saudi Arabia to join is remarkable. The I2U2 relationship is remarkable. The announcement of the corridor is something that is truly remarkable. We need to continue to build on these. And I'll close with this. I keep quoting other people, but I heard Condoleezza Rice once said, talking about the United States, but I think it applies to anywhere, is that our challenge is to make the impossible seem inevitable in retrospect. I hope that 15 years from now or 30 years from now, when we're looking back on the Abraham Accords as the beginning of something truly transformative, they look back and they say, of course it happened. And everything that happened after that was just the natural course of history, that bringing people together, building bridges across cultures and nations towards peace and prosperity is something that just was the obvious thing to do. That's 30 years from now looking backward. The hard work is today looking forward to make sure that that happens.
Congressman, thank you. And if I may begin with a question, I think that's on most people's minds, and it's the elephant in the room, and that's pertaining to Saudi Arabia. You hinted at it, Ambassador Shapiro hinted at it too, but in a town of political betting, where are we in terms of percentages of the U.S. being able to broker a two-way agreement, with the Saudis, and then the Saudis helping to broker a Saudi Israel greater establishment of diplomatic relations.
I only ask that because you're completely right that in 30 years from now it would appear that the Abraham Accords were, of course, the obvious thing to do. And I think it's a great testament to the leadership out of the United Arab Emirates that facilitated and led the way for new imagination in the region. The foreign minister of Bahrain often tells the story that it was his father who witnessed in the early 1980s the Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin signing peace here in America, the Camp David Accords. So who knows where we end up in 30 years' time, but the Saudis joining is important. So that's one question. And the second is, if not the Saudis, who else?
I'll take the second question first. Anyone else, right? I don't think it is a serial progression for the Abraham Accords now or at any time. I think there's the opportunity, and we should be having the conversations around the region, I'd argue even around the world, to say this is an opportunity. This is something that is changing the course of history, but opening doors to address problems we face as a region and as a world, and the more people we can bring in, the better. So I don't know who would be the first obvious choice after the Saudis. I would argue the Saudis aren't the first obvious choice, but the fact that we're here is a reflection of the gravity of the moment. And you know, when I first heard conversations about it earlier this year, it's like, wow, that'd be interesting, but that can't be real. And the more we hear about it and learn about it, that it appears that we do have this possibility. I'm looking forward to hopefully having the opportunity to visit the region a couple times over the next several months and to have those conversations firsthand. But I think the dynamics of what we're seeing in the region, the threat Iran poses in all types of forms throughout the region, whether it's their nuclear program or what they're doing in Lebanon or in other areas, and the ability to unite from a security standpoint is certainly a piece of it. But then when you look at the economic opportunity, the cultural opportunity, the opportunity for a region that historically has not necessarily punched above its weight on the global stage in solving problems. I don't mean that as a criticism, but you've got a significant part of the population of the world, an increasingly significant part of the young population of the world that has the chance with incredible academic institutions, wonderful resources, to say, hey, we can not just be at the table, but help lead to the solutions of the challenges the world is facing. I think everyone wants to be a part of that, and the Saudis joining that cause could be a phenomenal development. But when we get there, I look forward to celebrating it.
So I'll start with Saudi Arabia. We certainly welcome Saudi Arabia joining this circle. Saudi Arabia is a highly important country in the region, in the Muslim world. We understand that. I'm not going to give you percentages, but I think there is a window of opportunity right now. The U.S. administration would like to do it. Our government would like to do it. I understand there is Saudi openness to that. So it may be early to tell whether or not this will happen, but I can tell you I'm more hopeful now than I was a few months ago. I think there is a window of opportunity, and we'll do everything to pursue that opportunity and see if that can happen. In any case, we're not looking only at Saudi Arabia. There are other potential partners as well. And in our thinking, it's not only about Israeli-Arab peace, but also, if you will, Jewish-Muslim. We are looking at Muslim countries as well. It's an opening also between Jews and Muslims, not only Israel and the Arab world. And one way to do it is to normalize relations bilaterally, but there are other ways to doing it. For example, we're looking at some of these countries as potential participants in the Negev Forum, in some of the working groups in Negev Forum, as observers in the Negev Forum. That's one way to look at it, so you can expand that circle. But I think we do have opportunities, and we should pursue them.
Thank you. Over to Dan.
So I won't add anything significant to what's been said by this panel, my fellow panelists, and the previous panel about the opportunity. It's a real opportunity regarding the potential for normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And obviously, colleagues in the administration are working hard on that to see if the elements of the deal, it's essentially a triangular deal, is U.S. Saudi, Saudi Israel, Israeli U.S. There's even potentially a Palestinian component to that deal, to see if those elements can all come together. And with dedicated, focused effort over the months ahead, it definitely, as Mike says, has a chance. One can't, I think, accurately predict what the percentage chances are. But I do think it also demonstrates that there is a role for the United States in all of these potential new relations and deepened relations. At the end of the day, when Israel and a country it doesn't have relationships, it doesn't have a normalized relationship with, decide to open those relations, that's a bilateral matter, and we will welcome it and applaud it anywhere it occurs. But it is also the case that many of those countries look to the kind of partnership that they could develop with Israel, but together with the United States. We certainly see that in the Negev Forum. We've certainly seen that even in the bilateral examples of UAE and Israel and of Morocco and Israel. And I would say even this week, the signing of a very important agreement between the United States and Bahrain, very much a bilateral event between the United States and one of its important partners in the region, may in some ways be an outgrowth of Bahrain's decision to join the Abraham Accords. So countries will look for the ways that they can describe to their own publics that they are benefiting from this new step they would take. That may involve economic benefits. It may involve access to technology. It may involve participation in broader partnerships with the U.S. and with others. They will also, of course, ask the questions about the difficulties around the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That remains an issue that leaders in the region and beyond the region are concerned about. It remains an issue that is resonant with their publics. And at times has led some countries to hesitate. And other countries, as was mentioned on the previous panel, like the UAE, have decided to address it in a kind of a direct way and say there's a way these two efforts can move forward together, that you can expand and deepen a relationship with Israel in a way that also creates opportunities for steps in the direction of an Israeli-Palestinian resolution. That may indeed be part of this complex, multi-sided discussion going on in the Saudi case as well. One shouldn't make predictions. All of this takes hard work. Again, much of it has to be done very quietly before the time is right to bring it to public discourse. But what we have is a dynamic, and we have dedicated leaders and diplomats and members of Congress. I want to really underscore the impact and the benefit that is derived from the House and Senate Abraham Accords caucuses adding their voices so that this is not just the executive branch, but really an American, a bipartisan, a bicameral commitment to find those opportunities to reward those who take those steps, even those risks, and to ensure that the benefits that they're seeking are really felt and demonstrable to their publics.
Thank you. During the last session, Ambassador Ateba spoke about that there is no constituency that opposes more prosperity, greater economic integration, the willingness to create jobs and so on. But there is a large constituency in the region, illustrated by poll after poll, that does oppose warmer ties with Israel, be it on the Jewish-Muslim front or by the on the Arab-Israeli front. So I wonder if we're just all talking ourselves into a false sense of hope that all is going to be well. And I ask that simply because after the G20 announcement by President Biden, at which he talked about the importance of countries from India all the way up to Greece, connecting that corridor. Immediately, President Erdogan of Turkey made negative remarks on that. Now, India coming in means the Pakistanis will have negative remarks on that. So are we running the risk of not ignoring, but overlooking genuine risks that could put our hopes at jeopardy? And if so, what are they?
I'll jump in. I think those are two different questions, and very important questions. First one is, are we running the risk of overlooking the challenges? I think that's always the case, and it's probably one of the most important responsibilities each of us have in different ways, not to overlook the risk, or not just to assume that we've done the hard work, we can coast. We've done the easy work, as hard as it's been. The hard work is always ahead of us. And I'll go back to the story I was mentioning last night, where 15 years, an entire generation of work can collapse in a short period of time if it doesn't benefit everyone. So we always run that risk. That was the easy question to answer, because the harder question to answer is, what are the challenges? There are the seams where one side looking at the other saying, this is good for them, it must be bad for us. You mentioned if India is good for India, Pakistan's going to be critical, Turkey. Somehow breaking out of that model and getting into a model that says this is good for the region and everyone has a chance to benefit. And I'll bring it to the Palestinians. I had the privilege of being a part of a congressional delegation to Israel and the West Bank in summer of '21, first trip out of Washington after the COVID crisis, and met with President Abbas, who said, oh no, we can't do the Abraham Accords until we address the Palestinian issue. And I said, this is the chance to bring those issues up to the fore. I was there again 6 months later, and again just this past August, so I've got data points, not consistent lines, but the narrative is starting to change. I wish that Palestinian leadership would see the Abraham Accords as the opportunity to engage and move and advance their aspirations and their interests. And the same way with every other group within the region. But I'm also not naive to say, oh, it's easy, just come on, everything will be fine. There are going to be hard choices along the way. There are going to be loud voices opposing progress anywhere, anytime it happens. And in the Middle East, those loud voices can, and this is me coming from here, so I don't have all the history, but can go back decades, centuries, millennium. We need to make sure that we can address those voices and show people that there is a better path and lift them up.
So first, nobody on our side ignores the risks. I mean, I think we are the first to realize that there are people, groups, countries out there who oppose peace and normalization with Israel, who don't want anything to do with it, who oppose integration in the region. We know these forces. We experience them all the time in a negative way. So nobody ignores that. Basically, there is still an ongoing struggle in the Middle East between those who say we should turn a page, normalize with Israel because we live in the same region, it's good for our future, we have to live together and look after the well-being of this region. Those who say no, we cannot ever recognize them. So I think we are well aware of that, nobody ignores it. The key ultimately, in my view, is to turn this tide of normalization into such a success story that people realize that it benefits them. It contributes to their well-being, to the stability of the region, to the future of the region. More and more people should look at it and say, this is something good for our future, we should invest in it. And the road ahead is an arduous one, it's not an easy one. If people see that it really does bear fruit, then more and more people would like to join. Since the Palestinian issue was mentioned, I would like to say a word about this. I for one, was hoping when we broke through to the Abraham Accords, that the Palestinians will realize that this could benefit them as well. They chose to oppose it, to fight it. I still remember, I assume many of us remember, the photos of the UAE sending a plane for vaccines to help the Palestinians. It was sent back because they normalized with Israel. So this is really sad and unfortunate.
Yes, but they recently accepted money from the UAE government after.
Yeah, I'm talking about after
they've moved, which is progress.
Now, I do believe that they are moving in their thinking because they learned the lessons of their failure. They understood that by merely objecting, they are marginalizing themselves. But I also think that if we move ahead with Saudi Arabia, it will be much more difficult for the Palestinians to confront Saudi Arabia, and I'm hopeful that they will understand that this also affords them an opportunity. Dan mentioned the Palestinian component of U.S.-Saudi-Israeli deal. That's in the beginning of discussing this element. But there is an opportunity, and I hope that they will draw the conclusion, and rather than try to block the tide, they will join. And ultimately, I think that is important.
Thank you, Ambassador. Over to Dan. Before we come to the audience here, if there are any questions, you may want to kind of compose your thoughts. So over to Dan.
Thank you. Sure. Look, there's risks in every undertaking in life, but that's not much of a way to advance our own interests, to be deterred by the risks. Manage them, yes, be aware of them, try to mitigate them. But I think we have to be equally aware of the opportunities. You know, the United States pursues regional integration and advancing normalization of Israel and its neighbors for many reasons. It's the right thing to do. It's a long-standing commitment to help ensure Israel is treated as a legitimate member of the neighborhood, as it has always deserved. Again, that's a commitment that dates to Israel's founding. But it also is very much in U.S. interests, quite apart from the sort of the right and wrong aspect of this, to help ensure that an emerging coalition of countries in the region, in the Middle East and North Africa and perhaps beyond, is really anchored in alignment with the United States as a partner in achieving some of our broader goals. And that, I think, is what we really see at stake here. When Israel and UAE and Bahrain and Morocco, maybe eventually Saudi Arabia, certainly with Egypt, Jordan, and others, are addressing common security challenges they all face, but challenges that also affect U.S. interests, they are stronger. And the United States is stronger because it has that aligned group of countries working together to advance their own interests and doing it in close partnership with the United States. When these countries band together economically, in an example like the proposed India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, it addresses some of the challenges the United States faces with securing our own supply chains. And ensuring diversification of trade routes that can prevent disruptions that might occur. When these countries, which all live in desert climates and face the challenges of conducting agriculture in that part of the world, are banding together to share solutions and share technologies that help address climate change, that help address water scarcity, that help bring clean energy into their energy portfolios. That advances broad U.S. and indeed I would say global interests in addressing those challenges. And so when having those countries working together with the United States, but also internally on their own, but in partnership with us, that strengthens the United States vis-a-vis our global competitors, who are also going to have relationships in this region, of course, and even with this coalition. But we want this coalition to be as aligned as possible with the United States. So we will make that investment. We will do it aware that there can be risks in every endeavor in life, but that the opportunities, I think, vastly outweigh those risks, and we should pursue them.
Thank you, Dan. I have several questions here, unless there's anyone in the audience who's ultra eager to ask. Okay, in that case, I'll go here, which is a policy-relevant question. I think it goes to Dan, really. And sorry, Dan, to put you on the spot. You know, can you talk about when we expect the next Negev Forum Ministerial?
I'm sorry, Ed, I lost you for just a split second in the question. Could you?
Forgive me, Dan. The cynic in me wants to assume that was a way of you buying more time. But I'll say, you know, can you talk about when we can expect the next Negev Forum Ministerial?
Well, as Mike would attest, you know, the diplomat has to use every tool in the toolbox to get to the right answer. And if that means buying time, that's included. And maybe that's relevant to the answer to the question. The next Negev Ministerial will take place at the right time. I hope that will be soon. There's active discussions underway among the 6 countries. I now represent the United States on the steering committee and have spoken on numerous occasions in the 2 months I've been in this role with my 5 counterparts on that steering committee. We speak over every possible platform, and many of us will likely be in New York next week during the UN General Assembly high-level week. So the work is being done to prepare that ministerial. The working groups that I referenced earlier that are going to bring the projects for the minister's approval are active and are preparing their presentations for ministerial consideration. The discussions with additional countries that may join or may participate as observers are underway. So I'm not going to make any announcements. There are none to make. But I'm certainly hopeful it's going to be soon, and there's a lot of work being done to ensure that that's the case.
Thank you, Dan. And before we conclude, I think that dilemma within governments and between governments and being delayed due to a whole range of understandable factors lends weight to the importance of initiatives such as the N7, that we can move at a pace that's different from government, and we can convene as a neutral arbiter and a convener that allows for governments to talk. And tribute goes to Dan Shapiro for leading this work here at the N7 until very recently returning to government. So thank you, Dan, for the work you did here at the N7 and beyond to keep us moving forward while you were away from government and now that you're back in government. And our next big event, and I'll conclude on these words, is to say that we are heading towards a historical gathering in Tel Aviv, where we are bringing together members of the US Congress from both the House and the Senate and both sides of the political divide, and it's testament to the feelings people have on both sides of the political divide about the importance of paying attention to the Middle East and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict from a bipartisan perspective. So that's on the 10th, 11th, and 12th of October in Israel, side by side with members of Congress. We also have USAID. We are in conversations with other parts of the US government. But I think more interestingly and more to the point for our American hosts and guests is that we have leading politicians from Israel who will be attending at ministerial level. We have ministers from several of the N7 countries confirmed, and leading financial institutions from both the Middle East, as well as we're now up to around 700 billion worth of private capital fund managers from New York who will be present. So you can see we are heading towards a situation where we want to create a vehicle that is able to lend the financial and economic muscle in order to deliver what we at N7 wish to do, which is tangible benefits to those who are signatories to the Abraham Accords and those who join the Circle of Peace. And I think in direct contrast to where Iran operates, Ambassador Herzog mentioned Iran, where whether it's in Iraq, or whether it's in Gaza, or whether it's in Yemen, or whether indeed it's in Lebanon or Syria, the lights go off. And the Jewish people are referred to as a light unto the nations.
And I think that's what we're trying to materialize here, that light goes on in countries who sign for peace and coexistence with America and its ally Israel and the United Arab Emirates and the wider circle of peace. So on that note, I will bring our proceedings for this panel to an end. Please join me in thanking our panelists before we hand over to the Honourable Cathy McMorris Rogers, who is also the co-chair of the House Abraham Accords Caucus. Over to the Congress.
Thank you, and it's such an honor to be able to join you on this historic day, the 3rd anniversary of the signing of the Abraham Accords, and I hope that you've enjoyed today's events. I'm disappointed that I wasn't able to be here for more of them, but I just want to give a big thank you to the N7 Initiative for hosting this special gathering and for all their work in advancing regional normalization efforts in the Middle East. You know, it was 3 years ago today that the United States made historic progress towards achieving peace in the Middle East with the signing of the Abraham Accord Declaration. It was a long sought-after agreement that marked the beginning of a new journey in pursuit of creating a better, safer, more prosperous world for our children and our grandchildren. And today I can say with confidence that we've made great progress thanks to the tremendous work of international partners like the Atlantic Council and the work of my colleagues on the Abraham Accord Caucus, both in the House and in the Senate. By launching the caucus, we reaffirmed our commitment to advancing peace in the Middle East with our simple mission. And the mission is to provide a unique opportunity for world leaders to come together in our common pursuit to uphold and promote the values of human dignity, freedom, and hope around the world. And we're making significant progress in doing just that. We've led on the Defend Act to help develop a strategy for Abraham Accord countries and others to combat Iranian aggression. We're working to build on that progress with the Maritime Act to develop a similar defense strategy with partners and allies in the Middle East to counter maritime threats. And this is just the beginning. I look forward to continuing to work with my colleagues on the Abraham Accord Caucus to advance legislation that will promote peace, promote trade and economic partnerships in the Middle East, because I truly believe that when the people in that region feel the benefits, that's when peace will really take root. So I'm dedicated to securing healthcare supply chains, nearshoring manufacturing to help build cooperation in the region, and the FDA. So thank you again, everyone, for being here. Those that went above and beyond to make this possible, and your commitment to bringing peace and security to this region and the opportunities for a better life, no matter race, faith, or ethnicity. I know that we can accomplish amazing things through that shared commitment. So thank you, everyone, and go in peace.
Thank you. And before we go to the reception, I wanted to ask Mark Green to come up and say a few words. I'm sure he needs no introduction, but former representative, former ambassador, former USAID head, please come on up.
That means I can't hold the job. Thanks, everyone, and it is a privilege and a pleasure to follow my former colleague. So, a couple of things. First off, real quickly, I think we all get the sense that there are great changes taking place in the world, great trends that are reshaping America's role in the world. I salute all of you for taking the time and recognizing how incredibly important this is, because this is one of those trends. This is one of those forces that's reshaping the world in a very optimistic and forward-looking way. It's an extraordinary success that we all need to work to build on. We are thrilled to partner with the Abraham Accords Caucus. We're thrilled to partner with our friends at the Atlantic Council. So our role in all of this was specialized. Given the choice, we decided to host the reception out there. I hope all of you will join us. But this really is an important moment. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but we should not let this moment pass. Things are on the right track. They're going in a good direction. Thanks to the work of all of you, there are brighter days ahead. Thanks, everyone, and I look forward to talking with you.